hear me?
Yes, Master. Where is Padme? Is she safe? Is she all right?
It seems in your anger, you killed her.
I couldn't have. She was alive. I felt it.
What's going on, guys? My name is Eldeniro, and welcome to a very special edition of the Midnight Hour podcast, where today myself and the Dream Team, possibly the best duo this side of Tatooine, are going to talk about the rise of Skywalker. We are an especially good duo because this duo comprises 3 people, which is one more than the average duo. I guess we didn't really come up with much of a plan in terms of how we're going to sequence this conversation, but this movie has so many talking points that I think conversation will naturally flow as a result of it. I am joined today by Loosemore.
Hello.
The greatest smuggler in all of the galaxy, and Santiago.
Hello.
A nobody junk trader who is actually one of the most important people in the world.
I'm also known as the third son of Tatooine.
That's true, yes. I have heard him described as that. That is, without doubt, a true fact. So, The Rise of Skywalker is the 3rd installment in the trequels, the J.J. Abrams universe of the latest Disney-fied Star Wars experience. And it was a very big movie, and a lot of stuff happened, and oh my god, did a lot of stuff happen. I guess the best thing to do is just to ask, what were your first impressions, like the feeling that you had after you walked out of the theater or cinema. I guess we'll start with Loosemore because alphabetical.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't. It's the first Star Wars movie that I went into not that much expectation. I don't think that's fair on The Last Jedi, because there's moments in The Last Jedi which I really loved, but just in general, like maybe because there was a year off with no Star Wars, and just because the hype surrounding this one wasn't as big as The Force Awakens of The Last Jedi or even Rogue One, but I just kind of went in like not as hyped, and I didn't even see it until a week later. Like I went a whole week without seeing it.
Yeah, I was surprised by that.
I think just because I think that was cause I kind of went in without sort of like, I mean, I knew I was going to see it, but there was no like rush to be like,
yeah,
and coming out of it, the no rush was kind of justified, really. It's the first Star Wars movie that I came out with that I didn't really feel anything. It just came out with like, okay. Whereas The Last Jedi at least came out with like, I don't know whether I liked that or whether I loved that, and it would, you know what I mean? Whereas this was like, I don't think, I mean, it was a movie, like, and things happened, but I would say it's fun.
Yeah.
And there's fun moments, and there's cool things between characters that we love in the Star Wars universe, but it's the most messy Star Wars movie since the prequels, and I don't think that's a good thing, obviously.
What did you think, Santiago?
Well, okay. So anybody who listened to our Last Jedi review, spoiler cast, whatever, will remember that I had very harsh feelings towards The Last Jedi.
I should just say, sorry to cut you off, there will be heavy spoilers the whole way through this podcast, so if you didn't know that, stop listening now. And also, if you haven't seen it yet, what the fuck are you doing with your life? It's 2020 already, come on.
Also, heavy spoilers for all of the Star Wars movies. Just in case
the movie's been out. The movie's been out since last year. There's really no excuse.
Yeah. Also, heavy spoilers for all future Star Wars movies.
Yeah,
Should add
we
that
will be
to it.
spoiling those too. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so I really disliked The Last Jedi, and not for a lot of the same reasons that, everybody else did. It wasn't to do with a lot of the things that people online were complaining about, or that I saw a lot of people, like the loudest detractors, complaining about.
You didn't hate it because you're a racist or a sexist, eh?
Yeah, that's essentially what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No, I had a lot of problems with the writing, because we knew that this was going to be a 3-act structure, and Ryan Johnson decided to disrupt that structure, but in doing so, didn't leave a whole heck of a lot for the third installment to work with. Because I think one of the things that I came out of that review saying was that I just don't think that Kylo Ren was set up as a strong enough villain in the films, and that was partially due also to Rian Johnson's decision to have the Last Jedi take place minutes or seconds after the Force Awakens, and that's like a first in Star Wars history. There's always been years in between Star Wars movies, where we don't know exactly what happened, or we get hints of it, and some character development could have happened between the films to justify the placement of Kylo Ren as the main villain at the end, and the whole thing with Snoke and how he killed him, and it could have been dealt with in a way that made that more believable, but it ended up feeling kind of cheap and not really I didn't feel like there was much room to move forward after that movie, because it kind of ended a lot of the Force Awakens set up plot lines, and then The Last Jedi was like, no, we're gonna disrupt those plot lines, and it did. People are absolutely right. The Last Jedi did an excellent job of doing the unexpected and disrupting a lot of those plot lines. But just because something disrupts a system of doing things doesn't mean that the result of that is good or useful, I think. And so, when it comes to The Last Jedi, that was the issue. But then looking at Rise of Skywalker, having disliked The Last Jedi so much because of the writing and some of the choices that were made in regards to character and timing and all of that stuff that we just talked about, I'm amazed with how entertaining I found the movie. Rise of Skywalker, don't get me wrong, has a lot of problems with it as a film. I don't think it is a good film. I think there's a lot of stupid stuff in it. However, most of the stupid stuff, I think, in Rise of Skywalker is at least Star Wars stupid. It's dumb, but it's Star Wars dumb.
Yeah.
And I found there was a lot more of the heart and the hope of Star Wars in this particular movie. Whereas with Last Jedi, it didn't really, and this might have been what Rian Johnson was going for, I don't know. But to me, The Last Jedi didn't really feel like a Star Wars film. Empire is a very different film from A New Hope, but it still feels like it's, playing with the same universal kind of rules and lore. And that, I didn't really get that in the second installment. So when we're looking at reasons why Rise of Skywalker is the way it is, and we'll get into this later, I imagine, because I have a lot to say on this particular point, but it's it is the sequel to The Force Awakens, not to The Last Jedi. Yeah, and because Rian Johnson, fucked with that 3-act structure, we got a third act in a movie that was both the second and third movie rolled into one. He had to build a second act into his third act, basically. It's clumsy and broken, but it's clumsy and broken as a result of the second movie taking some of the risks it did and not, leaving a lot of room for those risks to end up being rewarding.
I mean,
with a lot of
I
the
kind of
backlash.
don't. I think JJ could have done a much better job if he tried to tying it to Last Jedi. I just think he wanted to then do his own movie. I think there's a good movie in Rise of Skywalker if he used some of the things Rian Johnson set up. Not to say that the things Rian Johnson set up weren't great. Like some things were just kind of Rian Johnson being like, none of this Star Wars stuff matters. I'm going to make my own film.
But what does JJ not use that would
The
have
the idea that like the Force is within
Yeah.
the little boy at the end of the movie with the broom?
Yeah.
He just completely disregards the whole fact that
well
the idea that like your significance in the universe is not tied to the fact that you're part of either the Skywalker family or the Palpatine family, and
But that
also
wasn't-
just I just feel like JJ cannot help himself. He just has to be like, yeah, it's just like the old one, but we copy pasted it and we changed a few
Yeah.
everything has to be
it
the
felt a lot
exact
like
same
me
as the
walking
other
out
things.
of Wrath of Khan, the second Star Trek reboot movie, where I was just
Yeah.
like, this is exactly the same as the first Wrath of Khan,
But not
and
as
it just
good.
felt a bit like, oh, okay. But everything's ramped up. Like the CGI obviously is better. Like the set pieces are better. The action is better. But that doesn't mean it's better to me. Like it just felt hollow and a bit like.
I felt
but we just hear me out for a second though. You're talking about like the kid with the broom and the idea that like not everyone has to be, you know, like a Skywalker or you know, in this case like a Palpatine to be important in the universe. I don't think that this film says that you have to be, you know, related to somebody important to be, that the whole thing with the kid with the broom and that not being in this movie, I think is more a product of the fact that in the second film, they added a shitload of characters and ideas that did not progress any of the plot lines from the first movie. As much as Rise of Skywalker to me feels like it's a sequel to The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi feels like it was like, fuck The Force Awakens, we're starting a new series. To me in much the same way, but it kind of reversed, if that makes sense. Right? Like it disregards some of the things that were done in, or throws away some of the things that were done in The Force Awakens, the same way that Rise of Skywalker does for this. But like there are so many like, why is Rose barely in this movie? Well, Rose is barely in this movie because like how many main characters do we have in this stupid series now? On top of, you know, having to deal with Leia's plotline and Luke's plotline, and you know, we already mentioned spoilers, but like Han Solo appearing in the film, we have like the three other protagonists who for the first time in the series share screen time in this movie, which is ridiculous. You know?
I think the worst thing The Last Jedi did was make Finn irrelevant, because I didn't care about him at all in The Last Jedi, and even in this movie, now he's back, I'm just like, I don't really care about you. Like obviously they're making Finn, Poe, and Rey, Luke, Han, and Leia, aren't they? That's essentially what they are. But Finn is, to me, just completely useless. Like his most interesting trait is the fact that he was a former stormtrooper who had
and they don't even use
an
that.
awakening to be like, I don't want to do this anymore, and they never really touch on that ever again, really, do they? Like, they never even...
This movie kind of alludes to the fact that the stormtroopers who fought back against their programming were force sensitive. Because that is what Finn is trying to tell Rey the entire
but it doesn't do it in a
film.
good way, does it?
But it
like,
does it in a
much of the
terrible
movie,
way.
None
It's
of it
terrible.
is done in a good way. You're kind of left with, like, I guess that's what they're going for, but...
But what I guess what I'm saying is that they're dealing with so many plot threads and character threads that need to all culminate at the end of this movie. They all need to come together. That like it's completely unwieldy. Like this movie is not, like I said, not a good movie. But it's not a good movie because The Force Awakens, you know, didn't do a fantastic job of setting up the universe because it was such a carbon copy of A New Hope. Yeah. And The Last Jedi like just added more bulk. It didn't answer questions from the Force Awakens. Because you like even getting rid of Snoke. Okay, you got rid of Snoke, and you said he's not important. Except for that, clearly he was and people are going to, you need to answer some of those questions, even if it is the way that Rise of Skywalker did it. Like, there's too much bulk. The bigger problem with this series is that they didn't plan out a 3-part arc beforehand.
Yeah.
Even in its roughest form, George Lucas knew what roughly Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi were sort of going to be about. In the first draft, the real bad guy of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi was going to be Boba Fett. There was a lot of differences in the script, but he did have a sort of rough outline for which direction the story was going to go.
Yeah, that he had crafted for years.
And then he gave that story to better writers, and better writers took years to write the script, and then they got different directors and they made the films. But you were talking about like three films where the directors were still writing.
Sorry, Sandy, I keep going.
Oh no, I was just going to say that this is 3 movies where the directors were still actively writing the script, which was not finished. Not editing the script, but still actively writing the script that was not finished on set.
Yeah, and apparently the cut we saw of the movie isn't even the real cut anyway. That's like the latest thing.
They changed the ending.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know, like I will say about this movie that when I came out of the theater, the first thing I thought was, geez, that time went by really fast. Holy shit, that was a wild ride. I really enjoyed it. It was very Star Warsy. It hit all the nostalgic.
Don't think about it too much because it actually doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, but like every single fucking J.J. Abrams thing that exists, if you think about it for longer than 30 seconds, it falls apart and unravels. Like I've always said about Lost, you can watch episode 1 of Lost and then watch the last episode of Lost, and nothing that happens in the middle matters. Like there is nothing that J.J. Abrams will not MacGuffin his way around to fucking put a bunch of good set pieces together, and it's great. It's visually stunning. Like, but he should stick to stuff like Cloverfield, where it's just a big monster comes down and destroys shit, and that's all you have to look at and think about. Like he just oh man, yeah.
And he doesn't give too many answers in Cloverfield.
He doesn't,
he has a tendency to like over answer things.
Yeah, and that's like he set up all these things like, oh, Rey is somebody, like all of that stuff. But we all said The Force Awakens is just a rehash of A New Hope. It's played very safe, but it will be interesting to see where it goes from here. I like the way The Last Jedi tailored off in a completely different direction. It kind of broke down the whole good versus evil Force thing, and teased an idea of a new kind of balance in the Force, which I really enjoyed. It's not like
I do
opposite
think
ends
The
of the
Last
spectrum.
Jedi had
It's
its problems,
murky.
but the ideas that they put in that movie of like, not these things don't matter anymore. If Rey could join Kylo at some point, like, and make a new thing, like kid at the end, like I
remember after The Last Jedi came out, there was this tweet that went incredibly viral that said like, oh wow, the crawl for the 9th episode looks crazy. It's leaked from the studio, and it was the crawl like episode 9, and then it says, it was all a dream. The furious Knights of Ren have constructed a new Death Star. Right? That is basically what happened. Like J.J. Abrams shit is so fucking predictable. It's like, oh, okay, cool. So The Last Jedi has kind of clouded the whole difference between good and evil. It's kind of implied that goodness and like powerful Jedi strengths can manifest from anywhere in the universe. Like the downtrodden will always have a voice to speak up, and anybody can be anybody. You don't just have to have this famous bloodline or whatever. And then he's like, nope, fuck that. Every fucking Star Destroyer is now a fucking planet killer, and they all exist on this evil planet. And
this
like,
ever-escalating, like, what are you supposed to do now? It doesn't make any sense. It could have just been a big-ass fleet. If they didn't have to have planet-destroying weapons, it could have just been a big-ass fleet. Like, that's all you need.
Oh my god! Like
why include the stupid cannons?
The stakes were incredibly high as it stood.
What doesn't make sense is that they all had planet shooting Death Star guns.
It was so...
Right, but how many planets are there in the galaxy? There's 10,000 of these Star Destroyers.
Not even
just
that.
To suggest what are they all doing? There's going to be
Where did they all come from? Who
There's going to be 9,000 of them.
How did they transport them? What? It took them like fucking 25 years or something like that to build a Death Star. They had to harness the kyber crystals, like do all that stuff. They had to like mine from all these separate planets. They had to get all these contractors together. They had to like abduct a bunch of people, like keep their families at gunpoint in order to get them to submit the plans for all of this stuff. And then all of a sudden, the fucking evil emperor is not dead, apparently, which also makes no sense and wasn't answered. Secondly, he has managed to teleport, I don't know, like 1 million fucking contractors to this random planet that nobody can actually get to. He's managed to get all of the resources on this planet that, again, nobody even knows where the planet is. And it's able to harness the power to make essentially 10,000 Death Stars.
Yeah.
With some of the men flying these Star Destroyers were pretty fucking young. Were they like raised and born on this planet?
He did have a clone, like a bunch of clones of Snoke, so maybe he just got the Snoke clones to do it.
I don't know. Like, I mean,
it doesn't
it's
make any
like,
sense.
I know that like nitpicking Star Wars stuff is like the lamest fucking thing you can do, but like you have to give us like one
But it's
super
not,
cool
though.
thing. Yeah, I
It's not
know.
really-
That's
all
the
three
thing I
of
like
these
to do. I
movies are
like to
bad.
think about Star Wars. I like to think about Star Wars. We all like to think about Star Wars, and
Yeah.
we like to talk about Star Wars. So when you
It's-
start dissecting this movie and thinking about it, what does this mean? What does this mean? None of it means a great deal, because it kind of feels a bit hollow and stupid when you start thinking about it.
One thing that's like incredibly heavy and rich that has been cleverly woven into the tapestry of Star Wars over the last like 30 years and has only been amplified by the Disneyfication of the series is that they're able to explain away a lot of things with the extended universe canon, and one of the best examples of that is Rogue One, and the fact that it explains one of the biggest flaws in the whole thing, that like, oh, there's a hole in the middle of the Death Star and nobody noticed. And they like crafted this incredible movie, like this really good heist movie that shows you exactly how and why, and like uses all of the correct like causal links between the hole in the and like it does that, and it's great. And like we're gonna need about 4,000 of those movies over the next fucking 20 years to explain away all of the shit that happens in The Rise of Skywalker. And that's the fucking J.J. Abrams effect of everything. But like, don't get me wrong, this movie has incredible scenes. It is really fucking nice to look at. I would watch it again right now, but I just find it so frustrating to just think about how fucking dumb it is. Like,
it's dumb.
He's
and
like
it's fun.
he seems like he's actually a moron who just has a really good talent for set pieces in movies. Like, oh man, it drives me fucking crazy.
I don't know that like he's a moron. Like, I think he can make movies. I think probably he shouldn't be involved in the writing or have any say in who is writing the story, because I don't think he's a good writer. I don't think he writes good dialogue, and I don't think he's particularly strong at like creating plot.
We got company.
But that's just like fan service, right?
Isn't
like,
there
it's
about 4
recycling.
scenes where Finn just shouts Ray? I think that's just...
Probably.
Yeah, that's half his dialogue.
Yeah.
If you like, if
Ray!
you got,
Alright.
somebody should make this in the next few years. Literally, just a YouTube video of all of fucking Poe's dialogue in these movies. It's terrible. Everything he says is terrible. He actually seems like a moron as well. Like, he's written so badly. The most compelling stuff that he says is, "We got company." Like, it's just, oh man, I don't know.
I
It drives
did
me
like
crazy.
that line from The Force Awakens where he's like, "Who talks first? You talk first. I talk first." Like, I
That
thought
was
that was like a fun little interplay, but then
a
it went
million
downhill
times,
from there.
Yeah, it was a million times better than, "Hey, I was holding for General Hux."
Oh god, that
Oh, kill me.
One
Kill
of
me.
the
What's
biggest
crazy
crimes.
is that Oscar Isaac is a fantastic actor.
Oh, he's
I
incredible.
Oh, he's so good.
And I'm
Yeah.
so hyped for Dune, because he's going to be the Leto.
Amazing.
Yeah, he's going to be class.
Sorry, Loosemore, you were going to say something before, and
I can't remember. I mean, there's should we just go through what we liked and then what we didn't really like as much? I mean, because I imagine there's a lot of stuff that we could nitpick and be like I don't want to start talking about the dagger and how stupid the fucking dagger is.
I just want someone to I want someone to confirm that my interpretation of the dagger is in fact correct, or
Okay.
that I am the
We can do
idiot. So the dagger is like millions of years old. Well, no, the dagger is like of ancient origin or something, right?
Yeah.
And yet when you hold it sideways, it perfectly fits with the fallen Death Star that
Which was
collapsed
built
a mere
35 years
30
ago or
years
whatever.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
well, I think none of that is actually clear. I don't think it says that it's an ancient Sith artifact. I think they just call it a Sith dagger.
I think it's heavily implied, though.
It felt like it was, except for when it isn't. They don't say ever like, "Oh, the ancient Sith artifact." Like, I don't even know if they use the word artifact. I think they just call it the Sith dagger, which is also like, why is there a Sith dagger?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
I know.
Wouldn't it be like a light dagger saber thing? Like, okay, cool, fine. There's a Sith dagger. It has riddles inscribed in it in Sith, fine, whatever. And then when you stand in, and you could only put, stand in this one particular spot and look at the wreckage, it lines up perfectly, and it has this little thing that comes out, and like it doesn't make any sense. Like, who made it? Why?
It would be so
if they
weird,
made it and they knew what was there, why didn't they just fucking go get it? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
The way this is a universe where, like, there are lightsabers, right? And they cut through things, and, like, they're infinitely better than swords if it comes to killing people, right? And yet there are also swords, right? That is so strange to me, because it's like the equivalent of, like, here's a bunch of blasters, but this old type of stormtrooper, he has a revolver, a 6-shooter. He carries that around. Like, it's just, like, come on. It's so stupid.
I read a thing on Reddit where some guy was like, the horses get off the transport ship or whatever and go on the Star Destroyer. The guy was like, why didn't the general of the Star Destroyer just tip the fucking Star Destroyer, and all the horses would have fallen off, and they would have won quite easily.
What's the story with Exegol? Like, are they in space, or is it some kind of misty ocean, or are they on a mountain where they are all flying?
Exegol is a planet that was so like from what I have read from like all of the information that came out from Rise of Skywalker, the Sith homeworld was either corrupted or destroyed, or like all of the resources were pulled from it, or whatever, and then they ended up having another one of the main Sith planets, which is crazy that like a whole religion just takes over a planet. Like, we haven't really, other than Jeddah, we haven't really heard a lot about like Jedi planets. Sure, the Sith just have these hidden planets, and they're all hidden and really hard to get to, because that's like a weird trope with all of them. There was another one in Rebels, which I don't remember if it was Moraban or if that's the one that it was based off of, but it wasn't Moravan. There was one also in Clone Wars, but from what I was reading, the planet Exegol or whatever is just like, it became the Sith homeworld afterwards. But then, like, who built it? Like, who built this giant temple? Is the planet hollow? Is that because like the Star Destroyers just like come out from under the ground? How thin is that ground? How like, is it the shields on the Star Destroyer that are keeping it from like getting damaged from literally breaking through the surface of the, like, what?
It reminded me of the trailer for Iron Sky, where the Nazis come back from their secret moon base.
Yeah,
that's what Exegol reminds me of. It's just so fucking over the top, cartoony sci-fi bullshit. Like,
not even sci-fi. To be sci-fi, it would need like an actual explanation that makes sense. Like, this is just bullshit. Like, it's like not even fantasy. Like, Dungeons and Dragons has like more thought put into it than this. But like, I don't know, man. And the thing Loosemore was saying about the tipping the Star Destroyer, absolutely. Although I will say, in the trailer, when those stupid horses rode out onto the Star Destroyer, I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And then in the movie, there's actually like a semi-decent explanation for why they do that, and it's like, oh, okay. But then you think about it, and it's still dumb. Because like, they should have just tipped the, like, it doesn't make any sense. But anyway.
Yeah, and also there was 10,000 of those Star Destroyers, and maybe like 6 like resistant ships at the time before like the rest came in.
Which is also stupid, because it's like, okay, like, they didn't even really like establish like what had happened, because like, oh, nobody came before when it was just like a tiny
but it's
like,
Lando,
skirmish.
innit? Lando is so charismatic. Like, he just convinced everybody in the galaxy to come.
All
Except
the
for when he
robots
had that
are
like
sexually attracted to him.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true. But except for that, like, that weird exchange with the other ex-stormtrooper at the end of the movie, where he's like, "We can find out together."
Yeah.
And it's like, does he want her, or is he like just being a helpful friend? Are they implying that they're father and daughter?
Yeah, I texted my mate after. It should have been called the what did I say? It was something like Lando Wants to Fuck, or so. Star Wars Episode 9, Lando Wants to Fuck, because he still wants to fuck. Like, we established in Solo that he wants to fuck.
However,
years later,
visual dictionary, or I think it is for the movie, came out, and there was a bunch of information that came out, and it's heavily implied that girl is his daughter.
Really?
Lando had a
Does
daughter after Return of the
fucking
Jedi.
have to be somebody's fucking daughter.
And she was kidnapped when she was 2 or 3 years old by the First Order, and this girl is the right age.
But that would be a good, like, if they'd expanded on that, that would have been at least interesting.
I don't
Like,
think
the
it would have.
fact
Like,
that
I'm
I don't
with Elle
think
on
it-
this. Why are they all fucking related?
I would
It
have
doesn't make any
actually
sense.
vomited into my popcorn if they fucking brought that in. Like, oh, Lando has a
would have
daughter.
been-
She's also an orphan. Like, Jesus Christ, does anyone just have a fucking nuclear family in this fucking stupid universe? Christ
That would have
almighty.
been almost as bad as the Chewbacca getting the metal kick to the face. I laughed out loud. Like, it was the dumbest thing. That is the dumbest thing in the movie.
Yeah. It was
That
ridiculous.
is the dumbest thing in the movie.
Loosemore texted me and said, "What was you tell it, Loosemore? It's your joke. You'll do it better."
I
than
said the fact that Leia had to wait until she died to give Chewie a fucking medal, like, it just proves that she hates Wookiees. Like, she's hated him
racist.
for New Hope, and she
Yeah.
still fucking hates him. Like, it's just ridiculous.
Wookiees are not even worthy of droid status. Leia might have said.
Yeah, she did like droids a lot better. But, like, I don't know. I think one of the most egregious things about all three of these movies, because, like, we're talking Rise of Skywalker, but it is the culmination where we're talking about all three of the new films at the same time. One of the biggest sins that these movies committed, like the biggest crime, is that they are not isolated. They don't exist in a vacuum. This isn't like a 3-part story arc like I was saying earlier. This is a 9-part story arc. There are 6 movies that come before this, and they do not. These movies refuse to use material from those 6 movies that came before it in any meaningful way.
Yep.
And I'll give you, like, my biggest pet peeve in these movies, and it ties to something that Elle was complaining about with, like, why is everybody related and everything. The fact that Rey is a Palpatine is freaking stupid. I think we can all agree the reveal of that was really stupid.
Yep.
The way that the dialogue was like, at least if you're gonna do that, say it in a way that doesn't sound as stupid as it did. Maybe that's impossible, but that's a pretty good indication that you just shouldn't freaking do it. But anyway, we know in episode 3 that Palpatine is kidnapping Force-sensitive children and experimenting on them. That is what is being done on what's the planet that they fight on at the end of episode 3? Mustafar? Is it Mustafar? I think it's
Mustafar. That's it. Yeah.
I watched it literally 6 days ago, and I have already forgotten.
And then, because it doesn't
I watched
matter.
it twice.
It doesn't matter. Darth Vader builds his castle there. It doesn't matter. But, so, did you know that's where Kylo Ren is at the beginning of this movie?
No.
What, when he's slaying all those people in the woods?
When he's slaying all those people in the woods. That is on Mustafar. And he gets the Sith Wayfinder from Darth Vader's castle.
The Sith Wayfinder, eh?
Yeah,
that old
Wayfinder.
Yeah.
But anyway, so this was expanded on in the Clone Wars, where it's like further explored this idea that Palpatine is experimenting on Force-sensitive children. For why? We don't know. In episode 3, and keep in mind, I'm a person who doesn't like the prequels, and I'm saying they should have used this shit because it's really good shit that they just didn't use, right? Palpatine also reveals that he killed his master, Darth Plagueis, who had learned a way of, staying immortal, right?
Immortality, yeah.
Immortality for the Sith. The Jedi have their way. The Sith have this other way that we can presume is different from, Force ghosts. Okay? So my question is, why isn't Rey, instead of being a Palpatine, the product of his experimentation that continued after he died to create the perfect vessel for him? And B, why is Palpatine Palpatine? Why wasn't the big reveal at the end of this that Palpatine was never Palpatine, but that the way that the Sith have managed to learn how to preserve themselves forever is by, putting themselves into somebody else's body?
Yeah. Or yeah.
And it turns out that the Emperor was never the Emperor. He was always Darth Plagueis. And that he has now cultivated Rey, like literally like grew her in a laboratory to be the perfect vessel. That's why she's so particularly strong in the Force, because she needed to be so that he could just
Yeah,
put
it's
himself
it's also why she like that could explain like fucking oh my god. Like
and it
the
ties
whole
to the prequels.
yeah, like they could use that to explain like her the identity crisis that she has on Mount Skellig in The Last Jedi. It could explain the
Why Palpatine was training Anakin
yeah,
and then didn't go into his body because he was a machine afterwards.
it would add so much. It would add much more context to the appearance of Evil Ray on the Death Star ruins as well, because it's like, oh, another version of you. Perhaps this is the clone. Like, you know what I mean? Like, perhaps this is what the like. It also just it implies cloning, and like the fact that she sees herself multiple times in those endless mirrors would. Like, oh, it's almost like a production line. It is crying out for the
And she could have been like programmed a certain way, but then like maybe she was stolen, and maybe that's why she ended up on. Her parents literally could have been nobodies, right?
Yeah.
Because they weren't her parents; they were just the people who kidnapped her. Maybe they were rebels. Maybe like that was raided. Maybe there's like maybe Luke reveals that like, oh yeah, we like raided all of like these things where they
But
experimented.
the whole prequels was based on the fact that Anakin was created from like an immaculate conception, right?
Yeah,
He was
fucking
birthed
hate
out
that.
of midichlorians, and like
But
he
is
didn't
that
have
true?
a father.
Is
I
that
mean, I
true,
don't,
or
like-
is that Darth Plagueis as Palpatine trying to create? This is like his first phase. Like this whole thing could have been.
Exactly,
This whole
yeah.
thing could have made sense. He
Yeah.
could have created Anakin in a similar but different way, and Anakin failed and didn't work, so he needed to create something else, something better, which ultimately results in Rey.
Yeah. I mean, do we actually know what the Emperor's plan? Like, they never explain in this movie. They do explain, like, obviously that because he's Snoke, he therefore was behind the First Order, but also meanwhile he was creating the Final Order because they can't be bothered to come up with a better name.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what
yeah.
the stupid thing is, Loosemore? The answer to that question is he was going to siphon himself into Rey's body, which is already what I'm suggesting, except for that I came up with a better explanation in a few days.
But that's his plan. But then if his whole plan this whole time was to get Rey, why didn't he just use his connection to Rey as it has the grandfather to like just talk to her and be like, hey, what's up? Like, come to this planet. I'll tell you about your dad and mum. They were really cool. You know, I've got candy here. Get in the van. You know
He
what I mean?
also could have
Like,
he could have done that when she was like 11 years old, like
Yeah,
because her
exactly.
entire view of the world has been built on the fact that she's a scavenger and a junk trader, and that she believes in good because she finds it in other life forms that exist, like BB-8 or whatever. But like, so he could have just brought her to Exegol when she was like fucking sold to Simon Pegg or whatever, and then like raised her as the fucking Sith Lord that she was gonna be. It's so fucking, because they say this thing in Star Wars a lot. He can't be a Jedi. He's too old. And you look at it and it's like a fucking 8-year-old kid. And it's like, okay, well, clearly that doesn't fucking matter. I call bullshit on that because Luke, Anakin both were too old, and then they went on to become the greatest Jedis of their generation. So, if the age thing does matter, which we're fucking told multiple times that it does, then get Rey when you're like, it's so fucking stupid. It's so
Agreed.
fucking dumb. Like,
I think that there is a confusion though between being Force sensitive and being a Jedi. Being a Jedi and a Sith are not the only ways of being Force sensitive, and the canon, like the stuff that's actually still considered canon, has reflected that time and time and time again. So like the idea of like the kid with the broom, like that's not discarded. That, to me, that was like Rian Johnson winking at what his trilogy was going to be about.
I agree with that, and I think
I honestly being Force Jedi is a religion and it's a form of training, right? When they were saying they were too old, it was too old to be indoctrinated into their system of beliefs, right? Mm-hmm. Which you could argue Anakin probably was, and Luke probably was, because they both ended up turning their back on the Jedi.
Yeah, true.
In some way, shape, or form. So like, it's I don't think the idea of like anybody being potentially like strong in the Force, even stronger in the Force, because like one of the problems with the Jedi and the Sith is that they have limitations that are based on their beliefs and their belief structures. If you were to have somebody who grew up outside of that belief structure, which is why Ahsoka Tano is probably the most interesting fucking character in all of Star Wars.
Is that the guy from Rogue One?
No, Ahsoka Tano is Anakin's apprentice from not from Rebels, from Clone Wars.
I literally just heard, like, it sounds like a Japanese name.
Starts off as the most annoying character possibly in the history of Star Wars and becomes one of my favorite characters in the history of Star Wars.
Yeah, I actually...
She has like the most development of any character in all of Star Wars.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I watched a little bit of the Clone Wars as well over the Christmas period.
Don't we hear her voice at the end when Rey's summoning the voices of the Jedis or whatever?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Like, I understand what you're saying about like being indoctrinated into their way, but like none of the Jedi follow the fucking code anyway. So it's like.
Well, none of the ones that we watch. All the ones that did died. So.
Yeah, I guess. But Qui-Gon Jinn is like the worst Jedi ever, basically.
But they actually deal with that in the lore and in the Clone Wars.
Like... Yeah, no, but they even deal with it in the Phantom Menace, where Obi-Wan tells him that he keeps on going against the code, and he's like, "Oh no, but I gotta do it." It's yeah.
Well, and Qui-Gon Jinn ends up being right, and when he breaks the code is because Qui-Gon Jinn is the one who discovers how to do the Force Ghost ability. He teaches that to Yoda as a Force Ghost. And then Yoda learns it and teaches it to Obi-Wan.
Do we think overall these movies have been... I mean, it's good having... It's weird saying, like, have they been worth it? Because it's, like, more Star Wars. And coming out of Force Awakens...
But is there any value in them?
Yeah, no. Exactly. I came out of Force Awakens and I was, like, buzzing. I saw it 2-3 more times in theaters, and the same, like, Last Jedi. Like, I came out of it with that feeling of, like, wow, like, the throne room scene in Last Jedi, as much issues as I did have with the movie in parts, like, the throne room scene was genuinely thrilling. Like, phenomenal. It was a great Star Wars moment.
In my opinion, it's thrilling the best scene in the whole thing.
It's thrilling, but it's thrilling in the same way that, like, scenes from, the Rise of Skywalker were thrilling. It's thrilling until you stop and, like, think about it too much.
The
death of Snoke is really, like, oh my god, what the hell? And then you start thinking about it and you're like, well, what are they going to do now? Like, I think it creates more problems than it actually, like, it's an awesome scene. I'm not saying it's not.
I think that's what made it more interesting, though. Like, I think J.J. Abrams, his set pieces are, like, they have, like, great cosmetic, superficial value, but I actually think that scene in The Rise of Skywalker, like, one of the reasons why I found it to be so interesting is because it does just carve a completely different path, and it's counterintuitive. Like, you just wouldn't imagine anything going there, and, like, I like that. I like things that present shades of gray and cloudiness instead of fucking good and evil. I like the idea of
that, but it wasn't set up, El. Like, there was no setup for, like, where to go after that. If Kylo Ren was going to be the villain after that, or if they were going to, like, or they in the 8th installment of a 9-part series, they're going to randomly introduce the idea that, like, oh, this isn't actually about evil and good. This is a story about, like, the moral gray area. You don't do that in part of the Skywalker saga. That's not what the Skywalker saga has been about. When you have 7 films before that have been establishing, like, what the series is about, like, unless you are going to go, I just don't think it worked.
I feel like I could convincingly argue against it, but I feel like to do that we would just be talking about The Last Jedi, and we would just spend more time talking about a movie that we've already talked about for 3 hours.
That's true. But isn't that a problem, though? That, like, that we're doing that still?
Yes. But
I think that's part of the problem with this movie and with this trilogy is that, like it's just broken.
So to be fair to J.J. Abrams, he is getting a lot of shit for undoing all of the stuff that The Last Jedi did, and The Last Jedi is getting no flack for undoing all the stuff.
There is a scene, like, the favorite part of the scene where he, like, retcons The Last Jedi is when Rose basically utters the words, "Oh, I can't. I've got a thing to do. I can't come on. I've got a thing to." And they're like, "Okay, Rose, cool.
It's Subway Tuesday. I'm going to Subway with my friend today."
Yeah.
But there you go. Like, Rose was, like, one of those additional characters who, even let's say that she was written a lot better than she was in The Last Jedi. Like, where do you plug her into this movie?
Well, I don't think you need to introduce like a character. Just have Rose do the things that like another character, like they introduced the girl on the horse. Do you really need that? Like that, they added really nothing. It's
Do you
an
need the
interesting concept to
cone-faced
explore.
That's true.
droid
We
as
could
well?
further develop Rose's love of horses.
Exactly. Well, exactly. But like that, you introduce like a kind of a love thing between Rose and Finn, and then don't really explore it. And then later on, Finn is kind of into Lando's daughter. Apparently, that's Lando's daughter, but he's got more chemistry with Poe when they're like back and forth. Like it's just none of it. Like even. I don't know. Like
I personally, I don't give a shit about any love story things in Star Wars. Like, I don't fucking care. It's not interesting to me. It never has been interesting. Like, Luke and Leia.
Historically, it's kind of ruined things.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it really doesn't matter to me. And like, I understand the call for LGBTQ representation in movies and stuff like that. And like, I'm largely behind it, but also I just don't give a shit about love in the Star Wars universe at all. It has no part in it. I think that the key to Rose's character is not necessarily her love of horses or her potential love affair with Finn. It's that she is also an absolute nobody who steps into the shoes of a hero because of the circumstances, and that her heart and determination kind of take her above. And that was kind of the whole key to Rian Johnson's take on Star Wars, was that like it's about being a farm boy from Nebraska who takes on the Empire, and it's, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, sure, Luke was from a famous bloodline. And I just really enjoy Rian Johnson's interpretation of Star Wars, that still, in spite of that, anybody has the potential to become something bigger than what they are.
Yeah,
and
I like the idea of it. I didn't like the execution of it.
That's fine. And like, yeah, like
I also think that idea should have been handled in a series outside of the Skywalker saga.
Yeah,
I also think that Disney shouldn't have made these movies, because let's talk about this movie. This movie, okay, so Episode 7 was A New Hope.
Yep.
Episode 8 was a sort of bizarro version of Empire Strikes Back, which I actually preferred in that sense, that it was a reflection of Empire Strikes Back, but not a one-to-one of Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
And this was once again Return of the Jedi. I was actually we were going to do a plot synopsis of this movie, and I was just going to read the plot synopsis from The Last Jedi, from Return of the Jedi rather.
Oh yeah,
that was going to be the joke. I have the plot synopsis from Return of the Jedi. Like, that was the joke. It's ruined now, but it's fine. We're already past that. I
actually when I started talking with my intro, I completely fucking forgot that you had the joke. So I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I completely fucked that up for you.
It was a really dumb joke, but I get to talk about it now, which is fine. This movie, when it ends, we are in the exact same place that we were at the end of Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, we're literally in the forest on Endor. Absolutely
nothing was gained. Nothing new really happened. None of these characters needed to exist. In fact, the only thing that happened now is that Han Solo is dead.
And Leia.
It's like the only. Dead too. That's, I think, the only the only important thing.
And Luke too.
And Luke,
yeah. Wait, they're all dead actually.
And Leia. But it's. I don't know. We're in the exact same place. So why did these movies get made? And the answer is money. And we all know that the answer is money, right?
Nah.
That's just what the answer is.
They did
right?
this to put smiles on children's faces. Come on now. What do you got to be so cynical for?
But it's 100%. That's the reason that these movies are the way they are. That's the reason that they pumped them out so quickly. And I've said this before about Disney and their approach to Star Wars and Lucasfilm, and they were trying to emulate what they did with Marvel, and they were trying to put the Star Wars cinematic universe. They wanted a movie out every single year, and to ramp up to having more than one Star Wars movie out every single year. They thought they could do the same thing, except for that there's one big, huge difference. And that difference is that all of the Marvel movies have been, at least in part, based, and sometimes loosely, but still based on actually good stories that were written for comics that were developed over years and years and years of telling the story and retelling the story multiple times.
And you had a showrunner as well. Like in Kevin Feige, you had a showrunner basically who just oversaw everything. Yeah.
But all of the plot, all of the stuff that we are complaining about with these new movies is almost all directly plot related. That it doesn't make sense, that it doesn't need to exist, et cetera, et cetera. Like the writing, all of that was almost already done for, like, the Marvel movies are not new movies. They're adaptations. They're adaptations of comic books.
Yeah, they're
They wanted
biblical
to do the
stories.
same thing with Star Wars, but instead of, like, they couldn't make adaptations because they threw out all of the old canon, which good, because a lot of it was garbage, right? But also they didn't give them time to write anything new or interesting. They were just like, okay, you have a year, write Star Wars. And it's like, that's not how you do that.
It's frustrating because Solo and Rogue One both kind of tightened up the bolts on already existing stories. At least that's what I felt. I watched Solo twice again over the Christmas and remembered how much
it's not terrible.
I really fucking enjoyed it, to be fair. There were things in it that I didn't like for sure, but
it didn't need to exist, but it also didn't take away from anything,
Yeah. I would actually say, like, in a weird way, it kind of enhanced Han for me, because I watched all of the Star Wars movies multiple times over the Christmas period, and from Solo, when I watched A New Hope, I had, like, such a newfound kind of appreciation for the character, even though, like, he's always been, like, the coolest guy ever and stuff like that, but it is so cool to see the swagger that he has in A New Hope when you've seen it in the context of him trying to emulate Woody Harrelson's character and all that stuff.
That is interesting, yeah.
And
do you think
cool.
this saga suffers from the fact that we don't have, like, a truly charismatic not character even, like, Harrison Ford is so charismatic in the role, like, as in every time he's on screen you can't help but, like, just watch him. I didn't feel anything about these characters.
I don't think it's about the characters.
Yeah,
I
don't either.
I think that Daisy Ridley
actors.
is very extremely empathetic. Like, you can empathize with her very well. They picked her perfectly for the role, right? And then Oscar Isaac, and why am I forgetting the guy who plays
Boyega.
John Boyega? Thank you. And John Boyega are both extremely charismatic, especially John Boyega.
Yeah,
he's
like,
awesome.
just not given enough, I guess.
He is
just, like,
going to
amazing.
be a star.
The writing is atrocious.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as okay, so and here's one of the differences between, like, the prequels and these movies, because I think they have actually some inverse problems. The prequels had like a very questionable aesthetic. They had a very like, terrible dialogue, like the quality of writing the dialogue, and the stories were a little bit ham-fisted, but, like, there were good bones there. There were cool ideas there.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Where this is the inverse. The dialogue and the actual, like, speaking isn't the problem. It's what they're given to say and talk about, and it's the ideas behind it. Like, visually, it looks and feels a bit more like Star Wars, especially Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker. There were some really cool visual things done in parts of Last Jedi, which also are, like, really excellent additions to, like, Star Wars. So, like, okay, let's progress the visual language of Star Wars forward, right? But there's no substance. Whereas, like, the as bad as some people like myself think that the prequels were, there are really good bones in there somewhere that could have been, like, that's one of the reasons that I don't like the prequels, is because, like, I see the missed potential. Whereas, like, there is no missed potential. This is like you look at what they made and you're just like, well, the missed potential is, like, you shouldn't have made these movies.
Man,
make something else.
I was watching The Phantom Menace, and I was thinking to myself, like, I know that I don't hate this movie, but I'm going to, because I'm so fucking biased towards Star Wars. Like, I'll accept fucking anything if it's got the Star Wars logo on it, basically.
Yeah, me too.
But the scene where they're all in talking to the Gungans, you know, where it's like, you said no thinking you was better than the Gungans, blah, 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 whatever. So, like,
a good impersonation.
I was looking at the screen and I was like, this is not really that. And then I looked outside of the kind of the center frame where everybody's standing, and just the graphics of the ground that they're standing on is like, it's like fucking PlayStation 1. Like, it's so bad. I actually could not believe how bad it was, because Revenge of the Sith had pretty good, like the city world and all the stuff flying around was like pretty good. Like it was very good for the time. It's pretty good to look at now. But Jesus, the Phantom Menace is fucking atrocious visually. Like,
it is
Is
really terrible.
it? Would they have only done that decision? Like George made that decision to go fully CGI because it's cheaper, or is it more?
Yeah.
Like
It's
that's
because the reason is that he owns the companies who produce all of
ILM,
the
yeah.
So like that was the whole reason why they remastered it, was so that they could generate business for those companies, and that's why they went full CGI for the.
That's true. I think there's also a truth in the idea that like and I'm not like Star Wars was one of the first like proper blockbusters.
Yeah.
And part of the reason behind that was that it pushed special effects beyond what they were at that time. And the prequels, for better or worse, did the same thing. Like, they committed to CG in a way that no other movies at that time were doing. And, you know, like, I don't agree with it. I think the return to practical effects is much better. I think the idea that CG should be there to complement and enhance practical effects is where CG, like, the future of CG in movies, like, really should be. But, like, I don't know, like, at the same time, like, when George Lucas says, like, that Star Wars has always been about, like, pushing the visual envelope, like, that was the big, there was a big falling out between him and one of the other, I think it was, like, the producer of, I might be wrong about this, but the producer of A New Hope, during Empire Strikes Back, they had a massive falling out, and he ended up, like, leaving the project because he was saying, like, no, people love Star Wars because of the stories, and George Lucas was like, no, people love Star Wars because of the special effects.
Fucking hell, this
And
fucking
that
guy.
tells you everything you need to know about the prequels, and that happened during the filming of the original films.
Yeah,
Right?
I do remember like the big push for like big special effects in Hollywood at the time, with movies like, I don't know, like the later Jurassic Park movies and stuff like that, or even like, I don't know, something like The Fifth Element, like those kinds of movies. I remember them being like really popular because people would look at them and go like, wow, the effects. Like, I remember people talking about the graphics a lot in the 90s. I remember that
Like,
being
almost in a
really
video
cool.
game way. You know?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Well, this new
like
movie's
that.
out, but how good are the graphics?
Yeah. I remember like watching I went to the cinema to see Mission to Mars, and I remember like the person that I went with at the time just talking only about the graphics and how good they were, and like that movie is fucking garbage too. So I think it is just kind of a thing like that at the time this was actually seen as good.
Yeah.
But it was not.
But it was not.
Yeah.
So, returning to Rise of Skywalker, because like this is all connected. It's not like what we're talking about in Connected, but like returning to Rise of Skywalker as like a review, if we can call this that, right? Like maybe let's concentrate on like the only that film right now, and what were the positives and negatives about the film. We've talked about a few of them, but like what like the film also adds like a bunch of new characters. So I was complaining about how many characters were added in the Last Jedi, and that there was like unnecessary bulk in dealing with the story. The pace of this film is a problem, the Rise of Skywalker, because of all of the stuff that it's trying to deal with at the same time and juggle. And yet we also have the introduction of a bunch of new characters who serve almost no purpose and we have no emotional connection to, like Poe Dameron's girlfriend from when they used to be spice runners on this planet.
Yeah, the Power Ranger.
Her costume looks pretty cool. I have no issues with the costume, but she didn't need to exist.
Yeah,
she didn't need to. I mean, I think the one disappointing thing for me in terms of new characters, I mean, Babu Frick is fun, I guess, like that little guy, like.
Is that the
but that's
cone
just a
face
Baby
thing?
Yoda thing in it. Like, that's just, let's get something cute and it'll sell toys and he'll do a funny voice.
But at least Baby Yoda's interesting, like conceptually.
Yeah,
this is just like, I don't even know what this guy's supposed to be. Like it.
Yeah.
The camera lingered. There were characters like that in the originals, but like they never like dwelled on them.
I guess
for
he's
so
just like
long.
the Salacious Crumb of this movie, kind of, isn't he? Like you don't really like. I don't know.
Do they
He kinda
dwell on
served
Salacious
literally no
Crumb that much
purpose.
though?
Huh?
Do we dwell on Salacious Crumb that much though in Return of
No,
the Jedi?
but then
we only know his name because of the toys.
exactly, yeah, but exactly, but like I guess I knew Babu Freak's name because I watched the movie and I'm an adult, but I guess would a kid remember that name? I don't know.
I gotta be honest. Who is Babu Frick?
He was the guy who reprogrammed C-3PO.
Okay. Yeah.
Who had the
that
funny like
little
Marvel
tiny-
line of like
Yeah,
when
he looked-
3PO came back online,
Looked
he was
kind of like a gremlin a little bit.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't really care about him, I guess. I don't know.
So, like, why did he need to be in the movie? And especially because the C-3PO thing ended up being, like, a huge waste of screen time because
It really
he ends up
did,
being
yeah.
fixed anyway. Like, the story can't commit to any of the tragedies.
I know why he's in the movie. Because J.J. Abrams will MacGuffin his way around anything.
Yeah, he really did.
Like, there was no point to you're exactly right. Like, it is just like a stupid, like thing that they have to go chasing because of another stupid thing that he made.
Yeah,
like
that is the great tragedy of J.J. Abrams, the filmmaker, is that that's what happens. You could literally make about 3 movies out of The Rise of Skywalker alone. Like,
Yeah.
it's pretty insane.
What did we think? Like, I kind of thought that Kylo story is kind of the most compelling.
Yeah, I
in a
like
way.
it the
God,
most.
yes.
And I think that's one of the good parts of the whole 3. Like, I think because he's such a good actor as well, like, he commits to that sort of like emo character that he's got going on.
Until he's Ben. And when he's like, that's the crazy thing is that like when he's Ben again, after he has that moment where like Rey stabs him, he almost dies. Rey makes the choice to heal him, which I thought was like a really big thing for her character, both to like give in to anger, kill him, see the consequences, and then give up some of her essence to heal him, right? Her line to him is probably one of the best lines in all of these new movies. Her saying, "I did want to take your hand," Ben's hand, and then walking away and leaving him there. Like that was beautiful. And then the conversation with his father, mirroring what happened on the bridge in Starkiller Base.
That
and
was
then this
sensational.
time he throws away the lightsaber, and then he goes after Rey. And when we see him again, he is not Kylo Ren. He is Ben Solo. And I am amazed. Like, I'm shocked because I didn't think it was possible. But I am shocked by how much I was rooting for him.
Yeah.
After that moment.
I think that whole, as bungled as the Leia bit was, where she goes to the bed to die to distract her son. I think the whole Leia stuff they kind of did it well, but like you can kind of see the strings because she's not really there.
There's some theories about that. And the theory was that Leia was originally supposed to be the one to appear to Kylo, but they obviously couldn't do it because Carrie Fisher passed away.
Yeah.
And so
I mean, they could have done because they did a flashback where she was there. So, like, I mean,
but
it would have been
was
weird,
a young
I guess.
Leia. They didn't want to put in like dead old Carrie Fisher.
They said that they were not going to have her do or say or like recite any lines that she didn't actually say. Like that they weren't going to do any. They weren't going to fuck with a dead person's legacy, basically.
Right, exactly. Which I'm totally fine with. But so like the information that's coming out, and it could have been better explained in the film so that we didn't have to guess about it.
The scene with James Dean was fucking crazy though.
But that the scene with Han Solo isn't actually Han Solo. That Leia force projects.
It's his memory. Is it his memory of Han, or is Leia summoning Han Solo or something?
No. It's Leia doing exactly what Luke did in The Last Jedi, except instead of appearing as herself, she appears as... Because remember, Luke changed his appearance.
Yeah.
He appeared as a younger version of himself. With, his old vestments and everything.
Yeah, he just fermented his hair and stuff. Yeah, that was weird.
The idea is because of like the timing and how they show like Han fading away and then her body fading away in the same way that Luke's did on the rock.
Yeah.
That's actually Leia talking to Ben as his father to give Ben the closure he needs.
I fucking hate that we have to read like a fucking Star Wars encyclopedic novel to explain all of the shit in this movie.
That's
a cool concept. Like that's
I
That's
don't
some
like.
setup as well. They set that up in the last movie, like it pays off here.
That's true, but I really don't like that because I thought the whole point of Luke doing that was just an example of how fucking powerful he was as a Jedi and his ability to harness the Force and all that stuff.
But then this film sets up that Leia was also powerful and
yeah,
she becomes Rey's master.
yeah, I guess so. Yeah, like I guess I can go along with it. I think like in terms of what Loosemore said that it's set up and payoff. I think that's I agree with that. I think
That's one of the only setup and payoff that.
Yeah, no, that's
those
right.
movies
I think
have.
it's really important that we find those where we can.
Yeah.
Well, and then continuing the idea of like Ben's redemption, like him going to.
That's 100% the
help
best
Rey.
part of this movie, I think. Yeah.
And when he jumps down onto the chains and he hits the chains and he goes like oof, and it's like there's like a moment of levity of like him getting kind of like hurt and trying to be like a good guy but fumbling around it. That's like really endearing.
The hand thing that he does when, like, the big reveal when he gets the lightsaber from behind his back because they use the
Yes.
Force.
That was
the
fucking
Force Skype.
badass.
That's the best thing in the whole movie for me. Like
It is.
the hairs on my back stood up when he did that, and then he shrugged, like hand shrugged in Return of the Jedi, like that sort of like,
Yes.
what are you gonna do about it?
Yes, I love that.
It was
Super
like
cool.
genuinely amazing. Like that, I wish it had like for me, like he was the best thing in the movie. Like
Yeah.
and I kind of wish it had been more of that stuff. But yeah, that sort of half an hour there where like they did all that stuff, and then in my own mind, I thought it was going to go to a different place when they kind of confront the Emperor together. But then it didn't do that really.
Could I
or
just
what I
say-
expect.
Could I just say one thing about the Han Solo appearance? I thought that it's way better if it's a result of his own internal conflict and it's kind of like part hallucination, part thing that's happening inside of his imagination. Because if it's Leia that's doing it, it's like it kind of takes away from what Rey has just done for him, which is saying like,
Yeah, true.
blah blah blah, Ben's hand, whatever, and then like she walks away, and then all of a sudden all this conflict arises in him, and he's forced to relive like the most malicious thing that he's ever done, except he does it in a new context, which is like a great way of showcasing the conflict, of showing the good. Of showing like the good interaction and the bad interaction both side by side. It's a much better representation of internal conflict.
This 25 minutes of the movie, then when Rey flies off, crash lands, goes to Luke, and as weird as that like scene is where she throws it into the fire and Luke sort of catches it as like a fuck you, Ryan Johnson.
Why doesn't it
throwaway
just
lightsaber.
stop in the midair? Why didn't it just stop in midair? Why did
Why didn't he use the Force? Why did he have to actually physically catch it? That was a bit weird. But yeah, when he raises the X-wing and like that, when she goes, like that whole sequence of stuff is probably the best 25-30 minutes of the movie, probably.
I think that's that one thing about the X-wing, right? This is just like a great example of the difference between J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson. Was that when I saw that X-wing in the water at the start of The Last Jedi, I said to myself, I remember I said to my sister, I was like, that X-wing is going to get raised by the Force just like the fucking one in The Empire Strikes Back. And then that didn't happen, but then it did fucking happen because J.J. Abrams was like, here's a callback, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't know if you remember my pitch for like how to fix the Last Jedi, or like how I think you could fix the Last Jedi keeping the same plot. But one of the things that I mentioned was like instead of the movie taking place immediately afterwards, was it taking place at least 1 year after the events of The Force Awakens, and have a whole year of Rey having to train herself on the planet because Luke refuses to train her, but he's watching her and keeping an eye on her in a similar way that like Yoda did, but like extending that for like a year's worth of time of this.
Yeah.
So you see her becoming stronger in the Force. You see her training with the lightsaber, and every day she meditates on the same cliff edge, looking out into the water. And one day, looking at the X-wing, she just lifts it. She doesn't She doesn't do the whole do or do not thing. She just lifts it up out of the water, and that's when Luke decides to train her. Because where Luke had conflict and doubt, she doesn't, and that's. She did something that he couldn't, and he decides to train her. I think that's much more interesting.
I would think they could even do that in this movie. Like if Luke had kept hold of the lightsaber and like Rey said, "I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can do this. I can't summon the Jedi's from the past," and then Luke says, "Raise that X-wing," or something along those lines, and she's the ones to raise it, and Luke like gives her a speech and gives her the lightsaber back and says, "You're ready to, the Jedi within you," or whatever. That could have been a much cooler scene, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I was going with it, was like you could have done that in this movie and had it not be like Luke lifting another X-Wing. It would have been an echo of what happened in Empire Strikes Back, but it wouldn't have been exactly the same thing, whereas this felt like just a callback.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But the Force connection between Kylo Ren and Rey is probably the single most interesting concept that's been floated in all of these three movies. Like the idea that the Force could work in that way is super interesting. The connection between them is extremely compelling. Whenever they were both on the screen at the same time, there was of all the movies, there was a weird connection and energy between them that was like sort of romantic, but like sort of like predatory on his part, but sort of, it was just weird. There was something weird and interesting and compelling about their connection, and that using that connection, which had been expanded in The Last Jedi, using material from The Last Jedi. This was one of the best examples of this movie taking something from The Last Jedi that some people had issue with and turning it into like a major force in the movie. And they set it up beautifully. This is one of like the few things that was actually set up beautifully throughout the movie, because we already had the established Force connection between them last time, and the idea that like it might be more than just when they touch in The Last Jedi, like their hands actually physically touch. And so like there's this idea that like that connection is more than just like a mental image of what the other person's doing, right? That there is a physical connection there as well through the Force. And then in this movie, you have that with Kylo doing this on purpose to try and figure out where she is and ripping the necklace off of her chest. So that's already been set up. So when the time comes for him to receive the lightsaber from her through that connection, like we're already all in and invested on like that as a potential, when you see her put the lightsaber behind her back and he has his hand behind his back and he comes out with the lightsaber, it's like, it is sort of a surprise, but it's not a surprise in like a negative way.
No, that's
like,
the best payoff in the whole franchise. Like that.
It's so good.
It is so good. Yeah. I'm trying to think of other cool. I mean, it was cool, and then the payoff for it wasn't very cool. When she Force lightning explodes the carrier ship early in the movie, where like they had that back and forth, like using the Force, like Kylo's trying to drag it back down. No, she's trying to drag it back down. Kylo's trying to like do the opposite,
release it from her grasp, kind of.
Yeah, basically. And then she obviously gets so angry and uses Force lightning. Like that was a cool scene. Like seeing her do that, I was like, oh, holy fuck.
Yeah, but it just fucking reminds me that J.J. Abrams loves to do this person's dead, but you haven't seen the body.
But then literally like 20 seconds later, like that Chewie's not dead. Obviously, he's not dead.
But they did that 3 times
great.
in the movie.
Does it? Yeah.
Like, Jesus fucking Christ.
I was only okay with Chewie being alive because if that had been Chewie's death, that would have been a really shitty way to kill the character.
Like to kill all the characters in Star Wars and then Chewie like that would have been bad.
That's like that's the killing Chewie equivalent of not giving him a medal.
Yeah.
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 Well, I liked the part where
other things I enjoed a lot.
When the Knights of Ren walked past and a stormtrooper went, "Look, the Knights of Ren."
Second
fucking hell! Like, thank you very much, sir. I did not know who those men were.
Yeah, they were genuinely bad in the movie as well. Like they served literally. What did they do? They walked around, looked menacing. There's a point where they're all staring at, like Kylo's putting back the helmet, and they're just all behind him staring at him doing it. I'm like,
they looked awesome.
Yeah, they're the Boba Fett's of this series.
Oh yeah, they looked
but
cool.
Even Boba Fett did more to be a badass.
I know.
Like, they did nothing.
And why is one of them carrying like a giant meat cleaver? Like that is his weapon. Like I just don't, like. Oh, I get that like a lightsaber can deflect like blaster fire, but like a giant meat cleaver isn't gonna do fucking nothing.
Why did they call them the Knights of Ren when they already had something in the expanded universe in the cartoons that had the last name Ren? And then J.J. Abrams has to come out and say that they are not connected in any sort of way.
Oh, he's such a fucking dipshit.
Like, it's annoying.
Yeah.
Like, we know that Sabine Wren is a character from Rebels. We know that she ends up being an extremely important figure in the history of Mandalore. We know that she's connected with stuff that happens at the end of the Mandalorian sequence in some way, shape, or form through, like, that I don't want to necessarily spoil.
Careful, I haven't
but,
seen it.
Yeah, there's something at the end of the Mandalorian that's connected to all of that in a very tangential way.
Yeah.
Right?
I've seen.
But like, and we know her name is Sabine Wren. But then we get Kylo Ren, and it's not connected in any way, and the Knights of Ren, and it's not connected in any way, not even to Mandalore. Like it's like, but then he has to come out and say like, oh, there's multiple people with the same name in the Star Wars universe. Like, not everybody named Ted. Like that wasn't exactly what he said, but it was to that effect. It's like not everybody named Ted's related.
How many times do I have to tell you people that Johnny Skywalker is no relation to Luke?
I did see a good tweet where like somebody put like,
she is Rey Palpatine, but she's not that Palpatine.
what if Leia at the end? Leia. What if Rey at the end of the movie, when the old woman weirdly asks her what her last name was?
Yeah.
She goes like Rey Solo, and then that ties into Solo somehow.
That would have made more sense.
Also,
it would have done. Yeah.
Also,
like there's just I don't know.
It would explain the way that she was raised. Rey Solo. Hey.
Yeah. Just so dumb.
Oh God, that's even worse now. But that was really good, Al.
Thanks,
but yeah, you're welcome. But that would have made more sense, especially because of the way that she looked to Han as like the first like father figure in her life.
Yeah.
And like Luke was an asshole to her, and then just appeared and like was like, "Here's a boat, kid. Fly it to your death." The Jedi are with you.
Here, kid. Dude.
I know I said last time that they were a dead religion and that they should stay dead and that they had a lot of problems and they were corrupt, but now we're okay with that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we truly like loved in the movie?
Yeah,
there was something kind of cool with the light speed jumping.
Yeah,
because that was
cool.
that was another thing that they took from The Last Jedi that was like, oh, how do we like they changed the rules of how something works in this universe. How do we, evolve that? Like so now they can track ships through light speed. The enemy can track ships through light speed. So how do the rebels, these new rebels outsmart the Empire? And that was one of the things you didn't what?
I didn't really like that because it's kind of established that Poe is like the greatest like pilot in the galaxy, like or ever.
Yeah.
But then the TIE fighter pilots behind him still were able to light speed skip equally as impressively.
Because they can track him.
I guess. But it just felt like a little diminished. Like if he'd done light speed skipping and managed to like get away, I don't know. I just diminished. Like it just felt like
I just felt like they wouldn't have been able to get away until all of the ships were destroyed because they were tracking active. But that's the problem with the Last Jedi thing about the ships tracking, right? It's like, how do you get away from them now if they can track you? Without introducing some complicated of like, oh, there's a range on the amount of space where they can actually track you actively, or like something stupid like that.
The Lightspeed Wayfinder.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like something stupid. But I thought it was a creative solution to that. Is like now you have to escape, but one of the best ways that you can escape is by throwing the enemy ships into like only a really good pilot could do it because you're being thrown into essentially random locations.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to react to those faster.
Do we know whether the locations that they go to like had any meaning in Star Wars universes or extended universes or whatever?
I think one of the planets was supposed to be somewhere that we've been before, but I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, I figured they might like do something like that, like Easter eggs for like people who knew like about like Rebels or whatever. It might be a planet from one of them or something.
It's called Tatooine, but this is a different Tatooine. It's in a different solar system. It's not the same one.
No relation.
This one has tree suns, so. And Santiago is one of them. I liked when they were in the cave and Rey took out her lightsaber and then Poe took out his flashlight. That was adorable.
Yeah, C-3PO in that cave, like when they were saying like Poe was asking everybody if they're okay, and 3PO was like, I'm okay too if anybody like cares or whatever he said.
C-3PO's arc in this movie was like super cool until R2-D2 just fucking restored his memory anyway, and it was so fucking stupid, and it made the whole thing fucking pointless. Like you're just
because they didn't they have a line that said, "Oh, R2 definitely won't have
his
capability to do this."
Yeah, his backup is notoriously faulty. There's no way it'll work, and then it fucking works, and it takes him back to like, oh, but he actually doesn't have all his memory. He doesn't remember the previous 15 minutes or the last 5 things that he had for dinner. But other than that, he's actually still C-3PO. Like it was so fucking dumb. Like you just, I don't know. It's so frustrating to see shit like that. I guess most people won't care though.
I think genuinely, if you like Transformers movies or stuff like that, and you're not tied to that world in any way, I sent you like a text about like how I think it felt like a Transformers movie.
Yeah.
Because I like the Transformers, but the more you think about any of those Transformers movies, the more you hate them because they're just fucking stupid. But it's cool seeing Optimus Prime do Optimus Prime things and say Optimus Prime things. So that's kind of how I felt about this movie. Like, it's cool seeing the characters that you love do things that you like. But, like, actually when you think about why they're doing anything they're doing or for what reason, you're kind of like, ugh, this isn't great. And it kind of like the whole 3 movies really felt like a sort of Fast and Furious Transformers. Like, it didn't, I don't know. They were fun. Like they're fun movies. Like coming out of Force Awakens, like I had a lot of fun. Like there's fun moments in Last Jedi, and then this movie there's fun moments. But I don't think I like. I mean, do I like them? I guess I do.
I think we like them, but we don't think that they're good.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah, they're not good. And I don't think any of them are really good because we've seen Star Wars. I think that's basically what it is. We saw A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. So these movies are essentially those movies, just worse. So you just come away with thinking,
That's why I find The Last Jedi good, is because it's different, and it does different things, and it takes the things you thought you knew, and it changes them.
Yeah. Well, but I don't see, and that's where I disagree. I think like and again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but like the idea that it wants to do those things is awesome and excellent, and it's one of the most important things that Disney should have been doing. But I just think the execution isn't there.
Yeah, it doesn't really work in the context of what if JJ had made 3 movies, maybe they would have made more sense. I mean, they probably wouldn't have done because it's JJ.
They would have been
and
the same.
Or if Rian Johnson would have made 3 movies, you know, at least it would have been. I think they would have been better.
I bet you they gave Rian Johnson the movie in the middle because they fucking knew. They knew full well that J.J. Abrams was just going to make the movies that we've already seen, and they were like, we can't do that. We need a wild card in there so that he has something to react to for the 3rd movie. And then I bet you that's what happened. I mean, I don't.
Because it was going to be Colin Trevorrow, wasn't it? The Jurassic
thank God it wasn't him. To be honest, he's garbage.
Is it like, would it have been worse though? I don't know.
I think it just would have been the same bland. Here's fan service.
This movie makes me sad about 2 things. Because I didn't like the direction that JJ took with just like repeating the same stories as before. Mm-hmm. But because we did get 2 movies by him, I'm depressed that this movie made me wish that he had directed the second one as well, so that at least it was a bit more cohesive, if still boring, right? From a plot perspective, because then at least like it would have been like we wouldn't have had this like thing of like, oh, this is just trying to undo the movie before. Oh, this movie's just trying to undo like.
I don't think we get the Emperor if JJ directs the second movie.
No, but
no, Kathleen Kennedy apparently added the Emperor. It was Kathleen Kennedy's idea to add the Emperor.
Oh, that's
J.J. Abrams came out and said that.
I mean, way to blame somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, that happened in the old canon as well. Like, the problem was like, what do you do after Return of the Jedi? And the answer is you don't do anything involving the Skywalkers or the Empire after Return of the Jedi, because that story had been tied up so beautifully, and now we have this mess instead.
I agree.
Right?
I think the things that make Solo and The Mandalorian and Rogue One so interesting is that they're kind of like these isolated cowboy outlaw stories on distant planets, and I guess Rogue One is kind of strongly connected, but just the idea of...
But there's no crazy high stakes. Like, this movie felt fucking crazy. Like, the point, like, there's so many ships, and he's got Force Lightning, and he's able to do and it just felt like Avengers Endgame, like, it felt too big and too crazy. Whereas those
where do you go
things
from
feel...
now?
Yeah,
where do you go now?
Yeah.
The Exegol stuff is fucking ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
It is absolutely fucking stupid. All of it. Like, if all of that stuff existed, he could have just done that in the first fucking place. Why is the First Order even? No, it's not even worth it. It's garbage. It's completely fucking worthless. Like,
the fact that, like, at the end of Last Jedi and the beginning of this movie, it's established that, like, and this is why, again, it's like, why didn't JJ just direct the whole thing? Because then at least it would have been more cohesive. He started off with the stupid First Order and the Resistance. They're not the Rebellion anymore, they're the Resistance, and the First Order is the old Empire, but now it's called the First Order. Fine. Okay, you did that. But then in the second movie, that gets undone, and it's like, no, now the Empire is essentially back. They're still called the First Order, but now what used to be the Resistance is now a new rebellion. So they're not the Resistance anymore, they're the Rebellion now. And then we get to this movie, and it's just like, and none of it matters or makes sense. And, like, why do we care about any of this? Like, the people identify with, with the rebels or the Empire. People put, like, patches on all of their clothes and, like, get tattoos and stuff. Like, have you seen anybody with, like, a First Order tattoo? No, because the First Order is freaking stupid. And yes, you will see people with those tattoos, but there's also people with tattoos of Jar Jar Binks. So, like, it's not the same thing.
I love I love when people get a tattoo of, like, the latest, like, there are people who have, like, Doge fucking meme tattooed to them and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's just, it's all garbage. It's all garbage. And really, what Disney should do is take a long break, continue with the shows, because the Cassian Andor show sounds interesting. Now that I've seen the end of Mandalorian, the last 2 episodes really got me back on the hype train for, like, the idea that these shows could be, like, actually pretty good. The idea of the Obi-Wan show being, like, a miniseries and not actually, like, a continuing show that goes past 1 season is really intriguing to me, because it means they might dump more money into it. That's all interesting. But when they come back to the movies, they should do something that's either so far in the past that it's like, oh, like, where did the Jedi come from, or whatever, or so far in the future, or just, like, it needs to be unrelated to the Skywalker saga.
Yeah.
It needs to not have the Empire in it. It needs to not have the Resistance in it. You want to do something about the New Republic? Fine, but, like, treat it the way that the Mandalorian treats the New Republic, right? It's just a thing that's there.
Yeah.
They talk about the New Republic, but they don't really, like, engage with it in like a political way. Or if you are going to engage with it in a political way, then that's fine. But, like, just keep it away from the Skywalker saga. You can have Force-sensitive people, but maybe stay away from Jedis for a little bit, unless you're going to go Old Republic, and show us, like, what the real Old Republic was like, right?
Yeah.
It's just, you gotta get away from, and I'm not saying get away from the aesthetic, because Mandalorian proved that you can, and Rogue One also, that you can do stuff within that timeline that doesn't feel like a complete rehash, right?
Yeah.
But and they can have, like, new and interesting ideas and all of that stuff. But if you're going to continue Star Wars and you're going to take a different approach to it, then do it outside of the context of this main series, which I'm glad that they're saying that the Skywalker saga is dead, but I'm really worried that they are going to make, essentially, like Loosemore was kind of alluding, that this was kind of like Endgame-ish. I'm really worried about, like, the Marvel-fication of Star Wars, because then it won't feel like Star Wars anymore. Like, and it doesn't have to have the same aesthetic to look like it to be Star Wars, but, like, there was an argument, I don't know that I fully agree with it, that one of the things that The Last Jedi was missing to feel like a really good Star Wars story is hope. That even at the end of Empire Strikes Back or during Strikes Back, there is a sense of hope that permeates through all of, like, the darkness, and that, The Last Jedi didn't really have that in the same way, or when it did, it didn't quite feel the same way. I don't know if I totally agree with that, because I think at the end of The Last Jedi there is, a sense of hope.
One of the last words in it is the rebellion reborn, and I think it's pretty damn hopeful, actually. And I think the whole no, I'm not even gonna fucking get it. I think you and I are destined to do this forever.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's no point in me. Like I just disagree with the statement, basically. But...
Oh no, I'm not saying that like to reiterate. I don't necessarily agree with that statement. That's just something that like I've heard people argue, and I've read about. I do think that there is an element of hope in the Last Jedi. Does it feel the same? Is that part of why, to me, it doesn't feel necessarily like a Star Wars movie in the same way that this mess that is Rise of Skywalker does for some reason? I don't know. Speaking of messes and Rise of Skywalker, we were talking about things that we enjoyed. I didn't mind the flashback. I thought I was going to mind the flashback of Luke and Leia training together.
Oh, yeah, I thought that was fine. Yeah. I thought that was fine.
It looked Luke looked weird. Luke looked really young, which is weird.
He was. They were both really young.
Yeah, but like he looked sort of like Empire Strikes Back young. Do you know what I mean? Like at the start of Empire Strikes Back, he looked like Mark Hamill after a car accident, and then he stays kind of young, and then by the Return of the Jedi, he looks like a 40-year-old. He should have been looking like a 40-year-old.
Yeah, like they emphasized his baby face entirely.
I feel like they deep faked his face from a scene from one of the other movies.
I get it. So I don't know. I've only seen it once, but in that moment, he just looked too young. But
I thought Leia's face looked weirder. Leia looked weirdly CG. Mark Hamill's face looked like Mark Hamill, but like maybe.
Oh, it looked like Mark Hamill. It just looked like he just looked too young.
Yeah, to me that's a smaller gripe than like when they again pan to Leia and she moves her helmet up and it's like, whoa, why did they CG her? Couldn't they have like done the same thing? Couldn't they have just like grabbed her face from another scene and like...
It's for sure a cool scene. It just took me out of it a little bit in that moment where I was like, Luke looks like 20-year-old Luke rather than like 45-year-old.
I get what you're saying, and I appreciate your attention to detail. I just thought that like that Leia's face looking so CG was more distracting than Luke's. Maybe that's why I didn't pay that much attention to Luke's face, is because I was so distracted by Leia's face.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of this movie, though. It's a little bit like, over here, it's distracting you with the, like, don't think about it, just, there's something else going on. Like, don't think about it. Yeah.
Again, using something in The Last Jedi, a lot of people, myself included, hated the Carrie Poppins moment. And this provided context for why that moment was okay.
Yeah.
I still don't like that scene because I think like it's filmed weird, because she does look like Mary Poppins. But having the context of like, no, not only was she trained, but she had like a force vision and made a conscious decision, which seems like a very like Jedi kind of like old medieval knight kind of decision of like, oh no, I had like this realization, I'm going to lay down my sword and choose to abandon this path, kind of, right? And I will not lift that sword again.
Yeah.
And she does. She leaves her lightsaber and she gives it to Luke. And
that scene at the end, like when she uses Leia's lightsaber, is very, very cool. But again, I don't like the fact that the Emperor keeps shooting lightning into his own fucking face. Like he's done that 3 times.
He's also done the strike me down and join the dark side. Like fucking how many fucking like this doesn't work, you dumb fuck. Like,
well, yeah, but that's the thing, is that he didn't want her to strike him down so that she would join the dark side. Like he reveals afterwards that like no, he's gonna like become her. I know.
I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about his methodology. Like he's tried this numerous times now in numerous films, and it has been unsuccessful thus far. Yet he still
definition
falls
of
back
insanity.
It's not. It's like you wouldn't even use the same line on Tinder 3 times if it didn't fucking work. It's I don't know.
I just don't like the fact he's died 3 times nearly by using like lightning to his own face. Like in the end of Revenge of the Sith, he burns his own face off by doing the same thing against Mace Windu, and then the end of Return of the Jedi, he basically does the same thing. He gets in trouble by lightning Luke to death nearly, and Vader's like, fuck it. And then at the end of this movie, like he just keeps lightning into the lightsabers until his fucking face burns off, and you're like, just stop doing the lightning, mate. It doesn't work.
So
Like
the original ending to this was that after that whole thing, Rey was supposed to like ascend and become some sort of like force deity. Is that like my understanding of like what the original ending was, and it just like didn't test well with audiences?
I'm shocked to learn that it didn't test well with audiences.
I don't know. Like, so the problem with that is that like that sort of relates to a lot of stuff that was explored in both the Clone Wars and in Rebels. But once again, like my same problem with Darth Maul showing up at the end of Solo, like my brother and I who watched Rebels were the only three. There was like three people in the movie theater who were like, "Holy shit, that's awesome!" And that's when I realized, like, oh yeah, nobody's watched these cartoons. They don't even know that Darth Maul's still alive. They don't know like what he was doing.
Yeah.
They don't understand how this connects and why this makes sense. They don't have the context for it. So there's a lot of stuff that like does make sense for like a sort of force deity like being, and the idea that somebody could like actually like ascend to that sort of point based on stuff that was in Rebels and in Clone Wars, but nobody has the context for that. So like of course it tested terribly because everybody was like, what, that's dumb.
Yeah, also like there's enough Christ imagery in Star Wars.
Yep,
like,
absolutely.
We don't need more.
do we think it's even a good title for the movie?
No.
Like The Rise of Skywalker?
Garbage.
Yeah.
It should have been called The
Yeah.
Rebellion Reborn, and I will stick to that forever, because I came up with it, so I like
It
it.
should have been called Return of the Return.
Yeah.
Um,
It should have been called
freaking movie.
It should have been called the first three lines from the opening crawl, all capital letters with an exclamation mark at the end. Star Wars
The dead
Episode 9.
speak.
The dead speak.
that was
God
horrible.
almighty.
That got off to a bad start, to be fair.
Yeah, really fucking bad. Like, it is the exact same thing as it was all a dream.
Episode 9, Sith Wayfinder.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. There's so many fucking cool titles that you can make out of Star Wars movies really easily, and The Rise of Skywalker is not one of them.
You could have made cool titles out of this one. I'm sure if we like actually like workshopped it for like 5 minutes, we could come up with a better title. I'm not saying that we should do that, but like it's totally possible. There were a lot of interesting ideas in this movie. Not all of them got touched on, properly. Not all of them got explored. I'd actually say that most of them didn't. But like, but you could say that for the first movie as well. One of the things about The Last Jedi that's awesome is the title. The Last Jedi is an awesome title.
I mean, if this movie was actually called The Last Jedi, it kind of would have made a lot more sense.
Yeah, and if the other one was called The Rise of Skywalker, it probably would have made more sense as well.
Yeah.
That's true.
It should have been
That's
called
absolutely true.
Star Wars Episode 9, A Good Day to Star Wars.
Yes. Yes.
Would you even rank these movies above, like from Force Awakens to, obviously to assume that like it, A New Hope, Empire, Return of the Jedi are the
King's
pinnacle of those movies? Would you rank these above the
Rogue
prequels
One.
in your own mind?
Yes.
I'm so conflicted on that because I think now that we have the whole picture of what everything is, I feel like in a lot of ways these are much better movies.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, like the core ideas of what were in the prequels. Okay, long story short, yes, these are better than the prequels. They just are. The prequels are a mess, and the just like the quality of like even just like the dialogue. Anakin, you're breaking my heart. Like you took like some really excellent actors, and they look like garbage in those movies just because of the direction is terrible and the dialogue is terrible, and like forget the CG and how crappy it looks in a lot of those movies. It's just like it's just badly done. So yeah, these are technically above the prequels. But like the fact that I'm even like considering that they might not be in some respects is problematic for Disney.
Yeah, and plus these ones don't have Watto, so it's a balance. Exactly. Exactly.
I was watching Revenge of the Sith, as I've mentioned about 20 fucking times. This is a line from it. Anakin, you are so beautiful. Padme, it's only because I'm so in love. Anakin, no, It's because I'm so in love with you. Fucking Christ almighty.
I mean, that's good stuff.
My fucking... When I was about 13 years old and I had to write essays for creative writing and stuff like that, my dialogue was fucking way better than this. Oh my god,
I love
it's so fucking
the one that always gets quoted from Clone Wars, the sand. I hate sand.
Yeah, I know. It's
coarse and
you.
it gets everywhere.
But that's...
Like, I hate his delivery of it also. It's like you took bad dialogue and then you gave it to Hayden Christensen with a bad director and you made him deliver it in like the weirdest way possible.
They do that with everything because in the prequels there's no context. There's no outside world in what they're doing. They're not talking while they're doing stuff, so there's no other
they're just
action.
Sitting in it.
It's just...
But they're also sitting in a green screen room, like
exactly.
on a blue screen. Like,
that's what I was gonna say.
The
so
actors don't even know what they're doing.
They're just standing there in front of a green screen and they're told to read lines. That's it. There's no other action. Like there's no nothing is happening. There's no I don't know. There's no sense of anything. It's just
maybe younger actors are more used to it. Because, or maybe it just depends on the type of actor. But I remember watching the extended edition of the first Hobbit movie, and I was watching like the special features, and it was one of the featurettes that they were talking about Ian McKellen and how he had like a breakdown on set because in the original Lord of the Rings movies, all of the scenes with Bilbo at Bilbo's house were done using forced perspective.
Oh, yeah. I saw that too.
You know, so like they were actually like in the same space. So he was actually talking to another actor. Whereas this, they had two sets. They had one set to Gandalf scale that was all green screen. It wasn't real. It was just like blocks that were roughly the same size and in the same place. And he was by himself. And then next to him was the actual set for the room to scale for the dwarves and Hobbit, and they were supposed to be acting at the same time, and Ian McKellen was just like, I can't do it. Like, this isn't what acting is. And like you think about something like that with an actor who is as talented as he is and who has as much experience as he does, even experience with special effects. Like, he was Magneto, right? Like, so he's not a stranger to special effects. And you think about like all of these actors in the original, and not in the original, but in the prequel trilogy, and you look at the footage of filming and they are just in like green rooms or blue rooms.
Yeah.
And they're all kind of like talking to each other, but without any context for anything that's happening around them. It's like,
I think the point you're making here is that if they'd had practical effects or really shot on location, you're saying the prequels would have been better than these movies. That's what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying that. But
I mean, that's what you're saying, and then that's what's happening.
No, I'm saying that like at least maybe there, even with the crappy dialogue and with the crappy direction, there might have been more of a connection between the characters because they would have been more connected to their environment.
Yeah.
Like things would have looked more. I don't know. Like maybe I'm like now. This is bad, man. These new movies are turning me into a prequel apologist.
These new movies are breaking your heart, Anakin.
They're breaking my heart, El. They're breaking. No, I think at the end of the day they are better than the prequels, but not from like a storytelling perspective, and that's sad.
Yeah. I think I agree with that. But they're definitely better movies. Like, I would sit down and watch these over and over and over, and I can only watch the prequels at Christmas time. And,
that's fair.
And I still watch them over and over and over, so I don't really know how much of what I just said is true, but...
I don't know. I just feel like every time I watch... Like, I watched Force Awakens recently, and I was like, you know what? Like, at the end of the day, like, it wasn't too bad, and there was lots of problems with it, sure, but, like, it was entertaining. And I enjoyed watching it. And then around Christmas, I was at Justine's house, and Empire Strikes Back came on, and I was watching Empire Strikes Back. Now, to be fair, Empire Strikes Back is the best out of all of the movies, arguably. But I was watching that, and I was just like, holy shit! Like the new movies do not hold a candle to this. Like the storytelling is so simple and straightforward, but it's made compelling by good writing. Like there isn't like a lot that happens in The Empire Strikes Back. It's a pretty simple plot. It's pretty straightforward, but it's made interesting by the situations that the characters are put in, how they deal with those situations, and how they react to like the emotional stimulus that they're given as characters. And like I think the closest we get to that in this series is Ben's redemption.
Yeah. I really like that. And,
It is,
and also
the best part of these new movies.
I really fucking hated Kylo Ren when I saw The Force Awakens. I actually thought that he was garbage, and I was just thinking to myself like, oh my god, they're actually doing like they're taking from the prequels the fucking emo Anakin shit, and then I know that we don't all agree on this point, but I really think that The Last Jedi did wonders for his arc too, because I think that in Force Awakens he's completely evil. Last Jedi he gets a little bit more hazy and cloudy and shades of grey, and his vision becomes a little bit more clear too, that he doesn't just want the same thing that every fucking Sith guy wants. He wants something different, and that's like kind of the source of his strife and his conflict. And then in the third one it all comes to fruition in like a really good way. I think he's the only guy who gets a properly completed arc in the whole thing. You could argue Rey did, but I don't really think it was done satisfactorily at all.
Yeah, I think Rey was a little bit rushed because you kind of get to the point where Rey's OP really early, and then she doesn't really learn a great deal, really, because she's already like morally she's already the character from which she always makes the correct choice. Like she'll do the good thing. Like there's no sort of like, is she really going to do the bad thing here? No, not really.
Yeah.
Well, in Empire Strikes Back, Luke makes a mistake. When he goes after after to save Han and Leia, it's actually a trap.
Yeah.
And he's kind of inadvertently like the reason that Han gets captured.
Yeah, he's just too headstrong that like he
has to learn from that, and that's like proper development. She never has that moment, but also as much as Elle, I sort of agree with you with Kylo and like his development. It didn't go as far as I wanted it to go in The Last Jedi, but like. I get where you're coming from that, and I kind of agree with you. But like Rey was given nothing in The Last Jedi. She didn't get anything.
Do I agree with that?
I don't think she was given anything to do except for like kind of play mother to, but she didn't really train either. Like Luke just like told her that the Jedi were all full of garbage and shit and that they were bad. And that he doesn't believe in them anymore, and so he doesn't want to train her as a Jedi, but he sort of is like, okay, I'll help you control the Force. But then she has her moment of like dark side, and he's like, no, you're too out of control, or like whatever, and like then she leaves. Did
you know that when she does the lightsaber fight with the Rock, where she cuts the thing off and it falls on top of the that scene on the
when you said that, I was like, Dwayne Johnson was in it.
But
he's just off camera.
Her choreography in that scene is mirrored by Luke when he appears as the Force version of himself on the Salt later on. I think that that's super fucking cool, and I think it just kind of says something about the kind of air of Jedi power that she gained while on that island. The fact that she does something and then Luke does the same thing later, like I think that that's really cool. But yeah, I don't know, that doesn't really counter your point. I just wanted to point it out because it's a good thing about The Last Jedi.
That is neat. Yeah,
they did the same thing. I noticed like when Luke fought Kylo on Crate, like the ghost Luke, he had like a fighting style where he ducked and weaved and like moved sort of like fluidly within that. And then when Kylo Ren is fighting at the start of the movie, and then when he fights the Knights of Ren at the end, when he gets a lightsaber, he does that same duck and weave and sort of like he moves his head in a way that like looks like Luke in that moment. And it's kind of like, that's cool that like maybe they've done that accidentally, or maybe they've done that on purpose. But if they've done it on purpose, that's kind of cool to suggest that like Luke's his master and that's his Jedi, like that's his fighting style. Sorry.
Yeah.
Or they did it by accident because they didn't really think about it, in which case that's continuity, I guess, because they didn't think about anything. So it's kind of
cool. That's a really good thing. I'm glad you mentioned that. I didn't notice that, but now I'm gonna have to watch that again. That's a good shout.
I feel like I have gained an inch here. Don't give me too much. Yeah.
No. Like look, and I've said it since the beginning. There are things about The Last Jedi that I really like.
I know.
I just don't like the writing
I'm just
as a whole.
being facetious, really.
And it's not even like, I don't want people to get the wrong idea. Like Rian Johnson, I don't think he's a bad director or a bad writer either. I just don't like the way that I don't think The Last Jedi was well written. I don't know how much control he had over that, or if it was just like such a daunting task. I went to see Knives Out the other day, and Knives Out is really freaking good.
Yeah, it's got sensational scores.
Well, would we then suggest that, like, if Kathleen Kennedy came in on The Rise of Skywalker and was like, you fucking must have the Emperor because the Emperor's a fucking baller, maybe she did the same thing with Last Jedi, in which case...
JJ is actually JJ has talked about how hamstrung he has been by the whole Disney process, how much that he had to fight for, how much they wanted in, and it does seem like they're pretty heavy-handed in their demands, and I think that's also why they went with someone like Rian Johnson, because traditionally in Hollywood, when they give big, huge blockbuster movies to traditionally independent directors, it's because they can make them do whatever they want to do. Like, that's how David Fincher got to direct Aliens 3, is because they just wanted someone to stand behind the camera while they told him all of the beats that you're supposed to hit. And it's the same reason why a lot of, like, the people who direct Marvel movies are, like, actually, I'm not going to commit to that opinion because I haven't researched it in quite a while. But it's the reason why Trevorrow got the Jurassic Park movie. Like, he went from that Aubrey Plaza safety not guaranteed.
They're yes men.
Yeah. It's not even that. It's just that they don't have the experience to, like, you know what I mean? It's because nobody is going to turn down, like, when you've just, like, kind of broken even on a project where you've spent like $500,000 of a studio budget and you've gotten, like, you know, your $725K back, as Rian Johnson did with a movie like Monsters, or whatever, like Colin Trevorrow with Safety Not Guaranteed. I don't know the finances behind that, but then, like, someone huge comes along and says to you, we want you to direct our family friendly franchise that is one of the most highest grossing things that has dominated the landscape of cinema over the last 30 years. You're going to fucking say yes, irrespective of who they are and what it is. And
it's the same, like, if they'd hired, like, Guillermo del Toro or Tarantino, it wouldn't work, simply because Tarantino or del Toro would just tell them to fuck off when they interfered with the script or whatever.
Also,
you know what I mean?
Well, no, and they would have not taken the job. And a lot of directors didn't take the job because a lot of people were offered Star Wars reportedly before J.J. Abrams, and they turned it down. You know, but here's the thing: whereas, like, I don't think J.J. Abrams is a bad director or a bad storyteller necessarily. I think he's a corporate shill.
Yeah, he absolutely is.
And I think he does what the boardroom dictates. At the same time, I think that J.J. Abrams, you know, has a clearer idea than Rian Johnson about what, like, the spirit of Star Wars is, what, like, the feeling of Star Wars is.
So I agree with that point entirely, but I think that J.J. Abrams is based on the originals and Rian Johnson has it, but it's based on the prequels.
That's fair. You know what? That's fair. I can see that being the case.
Yeah, I agree too.
I'm telling you, like, until I saw Knives Out, I didn't know how to feel about Rian Johnson, but, like, it's just like he's a good director. I just don't think he made a good Star Wars story.
I'm a huge fan of his.
You know, I didn't like what he did with Star Wars, but that's the thing, is, like, you can appreciate something or someone, and also not like something that they did. You don't have to like everything that somebody did. And the same way that, like, you can be a huge Star Wars fan and, you know, pretty much just like the original trilogy and Rogue One and sort of The Mandalorian. And
I think at this point that's kind of what we are, right? Like, I would say so. Like, I mean, I'll watch the prequels whenever they're on TV. I don't think they're good. It's the same with, like, Force Awakens. It's A New Hope, and it's worse.
It's a crappier Hope.
Wait, I made a mistake.
An old Hope.
I said Rian Johnson directed Monsters, but that was Garrett Edwards, who is the guy who directed Rogue One, I want to say.
Did you mean Looper?
Yeah. No, I was just thinking of a different, formerly independent director who got big and got a Star Wars movie.
Gareth Edwards, I would have liked to see his original cut of Rogue One, because some of the problems that I know when we talked about it, and I said, like, the beginning of Rogue One is really choppy, that it's come out later that was part of the reshoots, that, like, they wanted to change stuff that he had done at the beginning. So I'd be really interested in seeing, like, what his original layout was. And I know Gary Whitta did like the primary script writing for Rogue One, so like and he's mentioned before that like there were some differences in the beginning and in the end. But like it got rewritten a few times as well. Like more people had their fingers in that pie. And I think that's another problem. Like reshoots and getting another director to help out isn't unheard of, but I feel like it's happened way more with these new Star Wars movies under Disney than like anything else.
Yeah,
and I think that's an indication that you have a problem in your production, line, like how you're producing these films. There's something broken there, because that shouldn't be happening with the consistency that it's happening with these Star Wars films.
They should really follow suit with what they've done with Marvel, with the Marvel Council and all that stuff, and they should set up a Jedi Council. And fill it with literally fill it with people like you two who fucking know everything that there is to know about Star Wars, and like what would be like
Dave Filoni, right? Who's working on Mandalorian.
Well, yeah, but, I mean, same as Favreau. Like Favreau, like is a big Star Wars fan apparently. Like, and has he directed every single episode of The Mandalorian so far?
No. Almost every episode was a different director, but he and Filoni produced all of the episodes.
Did he like they write? Say he was involved obviously in most of it, wasn't he? But yeah, I would be opposed to like him directing something with Dave, like with Filoni to write it as well. Like, I think should they leave it like 5 or 10 years though? Like, I don't really want another Star Wars movie like in the next.
I do. I just don't want to be. I don't want it to be tied to the Skywalkers, and I don't think that it will be. But I think that Rian Johnson's trilogy has so much potential because he did things in The Last Jedi that we'd never seen before and stuff like that. And I think like his take on the Star Wars universe is slightly more like fantastical and magical, in a way that we kind of need, instead of one that plays it safe. And
Are they still doing that though? Because they were going to give a Star Wars to the Game of Thrones directors.
The party line is that they're still doing it, but the reality is that no one has heard anything about it for a long time, and Rian Johnson just made Knives Out, and I guess...
But you know what? If Rian Johnson is going to do it, then freaking awesome. But give him, like, years to write a story that makes sense. Give him years to write a trilogy that makes sense. And that way, like... he might be able to, and not that he has to do this or anything, but like he might actually be able to redeem himself in the eyes of Star Wars fans who hated The Last Jedi. Like, and I wouldn't say I hated The Last Jedi. I have a lot of problems with it, but like there are people who are like actively boycotting anything he touches because of how he perverted Star Wars.
Those people
or like whatever.
Have never
like,
kissed
that's
a girl
horseshit
in their lives.
It's horseshit, right? Like. If you give him time and you remove him from the limitations of like the tone and everything of like the Skywalker saga in particular, because Mandalorian feels like Star Wars, but it has no John Williams, it has no Jedi in it, and it has, it's a Western in a way that like goes beyond how the original movies were Westerns. Like, tonally, it's kind of a different take,
Another thing is,
and yet,
sorry,
it's similar enough. Like it's familiar but different. It's not a rehash of something that we've seen before.
The original is also pulled from like so many different realms of science fiction, like from like Flash Gordon, like even like Dune. I think A New Hope is like owes a lot to Dune that I don't really see ever
Seven Samurai.
About. Yeah, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, the Akira Kurosawa.
But these
films.
These new Star Wars movies are just pulling from Star Wars.
Exactly, right? And we need, and I think that's an interesting point that you made about like Rian Johnson, that like if he can do something with something that's like not related to the Skywalker saga, but is pulling from different influences, right? Like what would like what would a noir Star Wars story be like?
Yeah, I know. Like I really want to see
like taking place in oh my god, what's the name of the city planet? Coruscant.
Oh yeah, Coruscant.
Taking place in Coruscant, like corrupt underbelly crime, like whatever. What does that look like if you have like a sort of like, what does a detective look like in the Star Wars universe? Like they wouldn't be like obviously like a detective, but they would be doing something similar. Like what does that look like? What is that approach to like solving crime? Like it doesn't even have to be a detective. Like look at like Blade Runner. Blade Runner is like classic neo noir, which is hilarious. That's something that can be classic and neo at the same time. But it is a noir film, right? But it's done in a sci-fi context.
Dude,
can we do something similar with Star Wars?
Can you imagine if they gave Denis Villeneuve a fucking Star Wars movie?
I wish.
It would be absolutely fucking insane.
But that's the other thing. Like, Denis Villeneuve is a different caliber of director than anyone who has touched Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like, we haven't had someone of that caliber touch a Star Wars film. Like, we just haven't. And I wonder what that could look like, right?
Yeah.
But it is also what you're saying. Like, they might demand too much creative control. They might make it too different. They might, And
also, like, it's under the Disney umbrella now, isn't it? So you kind of think how far... I mean, I say that, like, the last couple of episodes of The Mandalorian, I think, have been dark in a way that I wasn't expecting, and they've been sort of kind of violent in a way I wasn't expecting either. Like, for a Disney Plus show.
Yeah, but they're clever about it. Like, I've only seen the first 2 episodes, but like it's he disintegrates the Jawas so that no one gets mutilated on screen.
Yeah.
I know a guy did get sawn in half by a door.
It's pretty awesome because it's a reference to
The Empire Strikes
the
Back.
no disintegrations line, right? But also the gun that he uses to do it is from the holiday special.
Oh, no way.
Wow.
Yes, it is. It's the gun that Boba Fett has during the holiday special.
Jeez.
Like, it's freaking awesome. Like, but this is what I'm talking about. Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau know Star Wars.
Yeah, they're nerds too.
You
like,
know?
I don't mean that as a pejorative term. I mean, like, they are.
Yeah.
Sorry, they are embedded in the lore.
Exactly. It's good stuff. And they pull from the lore and they understand the lore, and that's the thing is like that one of the things that people have said before is like like it's not Star Wars unless it's John Williams, but The Mandalorian has such a different type of soundtrack, and yet it still works. Like, I still feel like I'm watching a Star Wars film. It's like, why is that? There's something there. There's a kernel there of what Star Wars is, and it has nothing to do with it being a Mandalorian and the armor, although that helps. And it has nothing to do with the references to the other films or to the cartoons or whatever, but that helps, right? Like, there's something there, and I think it has to. It's like is it a tonal thing? Is it partially an aesthetic thing? Like, is that why the prequels felt a little different? Like, I don't know, but like, now we have the prequel. And now we have these new films, and we have the originals, and we have the cartoons. How do we bridge all of those tonal variances into something that we can now say, like, okay, I guess this is Star Wars now, right? Because, like, we can't keep making stuff in the original trilogy time era.
Yeah.
Like, we need to eventually move past that.
Yeah, and like, it shouldn't be too
Or do we?
hard.
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, because you could have something that just takes place like millions of miles away or whatever. But even like,
or just a smaller scale story. Like, if we do a noir film about like some sort of like enforcer on Coruscant, like that doesn't need to be a huge story. Yeah, there could be stormtroopers there. Yeah, there could be Empire there. Like, but it doesn't need to like involve them in the same way.
It doesn't have to have
like,
R2D2 and C-3PO in it.
It could actually show them in a different context as like, what if this main character, this investigator who's solving a crime, is Imperial?
I bet any money that in 10 years' time we get a story about why the dagger in this movie was relevant.
By JJ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The dagger was relevant because there was actually like where that dagger originally was, there was a sword, and if you held the sword up to the particular desert where that sword was, then you could find the dagger.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, but it has to be bigger, right? Because it has to be the same but bigger.
Yeah. This sword can kill 10 planets in one
and
wield.
all planets have 50 of these swords. But it's like stuff that doesn't even make sense. Like, why? And I know we're just talking about Star Wars in general now, but like, why did Starkiller Base have to? And I think we mentioned this when we talked about Force Awakens. Why did Starkiller Base had to be like a laser that like shot out energy and blew up planets. Why couldn't it just? We already had the idea that it harnessed power from the sun. What if it just ate suns?
Yeah.
And then every planet in that system would die.
Yeah.
Because J.J. Abrams is like this, but
And then
A New Hope.
it uses that power. It uses that power to sustain its atmosphere and to move around. And then it's sort of like the Death Star, but it's like a natural progression of like how does a weapon evolve from that? Do you know that the planet that Starkiller Base is on was revealed to be the planet Ilum, which in the Clone Wars is confirmed to be the planet where kyber crystals are gotten by the by Jedi Padawans who are constructing their own lightsabers.
I actually genuinely did know that. I read that somewhere.
It's interesting, but why is that information like outside of the films? Because it connects to the lore, like
because
I think also it explains stuff better.
I know why it's outside
but
of
they're
the
so
films.
afraid of explaining.
It's
stuff.
because somebody, J.J. Abrams was doing a Q&A and someone asked him, "Hey, does this thing it mean this? Because that would make perfect sense." And Abrams just goes, "Yes." Yes, it does.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think Star Wars is ruined, and I don't think it's broken. I think the TV shows, if they can, because my problem with The Mandalorian is the length of the episodes and the quality of storytelling right up until the last 2 episodes, to me, was like problematic.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too much into The
'cause I
Mandalorian,
haven't
but
seen
El's
it.
got like, he's got the
Yeah.
amazing Stargate SG-1 episodes to come, which is great. You know, look forward to that, El.
There's no plot until the last 2 episodes, and then the last 2 episodes you're like, oh, okay, now we spent an entire season setting up a world and like an idea and a concept and a theme.
My problem with The Mandalorian
Fine.
is there are too many Mandalorians in it. What's
Yeah.
that all
No.
about? Hey, one other thing I want to say, because I actually really need to go to sleep shortly. The scene in The Rise of Skywalker when all of the allies arrive through the clouds really reminded me of the scene in Serenity when all of the Reavers fly through the crowds to disrupt the fucking...
What it actually reminded me of was just On Your Left. And it made me think, oh, they've just, like, Marvel did that in Endgame so much better.
Yeah.
And
That's
this was
what it
just,
reminded
and
me
then when Lando comes in and he's like, hey, I'm Lando. Yeah, okay,
I
cool.
want to fuck my
That was
robot.
a pretty good Lando.
I want to fuck my robot.
Yeah.
Well,
He's with her again in Falcon, so.
yeah, that's true.
Oh Christ, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But it looked a lot like when the Reavers fly through the clouds at the end of Serenity.
It looks a lot like when the at the end of the first Mass Effect game also.
That I have not seen.
You know, it's like, I don't know, it like visually, was it interesting? Yeah. There was some cool stuff in there too, like the Ghost, the ship from Star Wars Rebels is in that fleet. Is the same captain there? Maybe, I don't know.
I feel like
Is
this is
she
one of
still
those
alive?
things where you pause the Senate scene in like Revenge. Is it Revenge of the Sith or like
with
Attack
the
of the
ETs?
Clones? Yeah, like you pause the scene and then you think there's E.T. There's like somebody else. I feel like we'll pause that scene and then we'll like there'll be Ecto 1 in that fucking scene. There'll be fucking
There's Nike Air
like,
Max over there just flying through the sky.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be awesome if this was all revealed
This is the
to
Iron
just
Giant.
be like, yeah, but wouldn't it be like crazy if this was all revealed to just be part of, this wasn't actually Star Wars? These weren't actually Star Wars movies. These were part of
Ready Player One.
Ready Player One. Yeah.
It would definitely make more sense. Dude, I saw that movie and I was expecting to fucking hate it, but like, it's pretty good. Wow, no one here agrees with me when I said that.
I mean, it's Spielberg, isn't it?
But it's
so it's
like I watched it on a plane or whatever, but like it is absolutely fine viewing. I would watch it again. Is
it better than Rise of Skywalker?
I mean, most things are better than The Rise of Skywalker, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I just, I think at the end of the day, it's like we said at the beginning. The movie was entertaining, but ultimately, like, it's a bad movie.
Yeah.
But the entire trilogy is bad, And even like you like Elle, you like the Last Jedi, but does the Last Jedi hold a candle to even any of the original trilogy?
I have a really weird, and I think that this is like, I really don't think that I actually am analyzing The Last Jedi in an intellectually honest way at all. I think that mostly what I'm doing is trying to fight back against the wave of just sexist and racist reasons that people have for not liking it. Because the first reviews that I saw of The Last Jedi were from people who have no right to be reviewing anything to do with movies. People like Sargon of Akkad and Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro and stuff like that. And so for me, the movie has always just been painted negatively in this anti-SJW kind of light by people. And I think that when I talk about it, I've just intellectually been pushed into the position of having to rationalize and defend everything about it. And
yeah, it is weird that you end every Last Jedi rant when you like support it with "fuck Ben Shapiro," which is kind of weird. You end it with that.
No, I get it. I get it, and he's not wrong.
I saw like
I just like I guess I was where I was going with that was that like even the best, whichever movie of these you think is the best, whichever of these movies you think is the best, whoever you are in the world listening to this, whichever of these new movies you think is the best, is it actually like comparable to the prequels in terms of like coherent storytelling?
By prequels you mean?
I mean, I would argue no.
originals?
The originals, sorry. The originals.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. You are 100% correct in that. And I don't think that any sane person would argue otherwise, unless it was for some other like nefarious reason. Like I could see why a young girl would prefer to watch the movies with Rey rather than the movies that have two women in all 9 hours of them. So.
Yeah, no, that's fair, right? And I think there's things there that we have to take out of it, but I also think like we shouldn't be happy with what we got, right? And I think Star Wars fans have a right to be upset, and the idea that they're all whiny babies who are like ruining the fandom by being fans is, I think, like bad. Like I think that's actually like spin that's being put on this whole thing. If you look at the audience scores for The Last Jedi and for Rise of Skywalker, and you look at the critic scores, the critic scores for The Last Jedi were extremely high, and the fan scores were extremely low. And for this movie, which we as fans admitted is not a good movie, the critic scores were extremely low, and the fan scores were pretty damn high, right? What does that tell you? Because this movie did have a lot of the like quote unquote SJW stuff. Like it didn't go into a lot of depth explaining why Rey is ultra powerful with barely any training whatsoever. Like it didn't provide enough explanation for a lot of the things, right? It still had strong female characters. It still did a lot of stuff that like people were complaining about in the other movies, and yet the fan score is still high. So I'm sorry, it's not the people who are like, oh, fuck all this SJW stuff that are ruining the Last Jedi scores. It's the fact that like a lot of Star Wars fans didn't like it. They alienated a large portion of their audience, and this movie's bad also, and yet the fans liked it. And I'm saying that's also problematic. That's where I'm going with this, is that's also problematic. The fact that this has like an 87 or whatever on Rotten Tomatoes fresh from fans is like, I think, laughable. We shouldn't be happy with this, right? We should be demanding more from these movies.
I think that the fan score of any movie is automatically skewed when people perceive some kind of political or identitarian vibe from it. And a great example, like I think some great examples of movies where the critic...
This movie still had that.
Yeah, but nowhere near... Yeah, right, but this movie is seen by a lot of the people who decried the Force diversity in The Last Jedi. This movie is seen as a return to form. Also, the fact that they pretty much wrote Rose out of the movie, that's going to please a lot of those types of people. And any time that there's a movie that walks along those lines in the internet culture war that's been going on, there's always a huge discrepancy in the critic score and the audience score. And you can point to pretty much any movie where anyone has talked about social justice issues in the interviews and promo for it. Like you can go from the Ghostbusters remake to even Joker, which has like lukewarm let's say it's got favorable critic scores, but the audience score is like 100%, because because Todd Phillips came out and said a bunch of shit about how you can't make comedy anymore because the SJWs will come get you, and then automatically everybody just loves it, and that's the lens that they watch the movie through. And it's like the perfect combination of like all of those kinds of things that lead to the skew in audience scores and critic scores. You also have like fucking like every week in the build up to The Last Jedi, 4chan users having all sorts of campaigns to go online and assault the ratings of the movie. The same thing happened with Ghostbusters. Like, I just don't trust, if any movie is embroiled in this kind of culture war stuff, you can just fucking forget about the audience score because it's not accurate.
What counts as fresh? Does 6 out of 10 count as fresh?
No, like it's usually like something high, like 70 something onwards, I'm pretty sure.
Right. Because I wouldn't give if I was to rate this movie out of 10, I don't think I'd give it above a 6. I don't even know whether I'd give it a 6 because it's not good.
I don't even know if I could rate the movie honestly, because like I just feel like
it's not really a movie.
As a movie it's fucking garbage, but it's a collection of scenes. As a collection of scenes that hit like all of the dopamine receptors in my nostalgia craving brain, then it's very good and almost close to perfect, I would argue. So it's really strange. Star Wars is one thing that I just can't really honestly assess because I'm so biased towards it and I'm so protective over it, and I will do anything that I can to find ways to like it. So it's like, I don't know, it's just really hard to be honest about it, I think.
I don't know. I think we have a lot to look forward to with like the shows, and I think if they can invest more time and money and budget and just in everything into the shows, then I don't know. I've been wondering for a while if like the future of Star Wars isn't in like smaller stories being told on a smaller screen, which is unfortunate because of like Star Wars like is, you know, it should be spectacle and it should be big and everything, but like maybe we've had too much of that now, maybe, like especially with like you guys are saying and Loosemore was saying, like the stakes in this movie were ridiculous. Like, how do you top that? How do you go above that? You can't. So you have to tell smaller stories, and one of the products of having smaller stories is that like they have to be a bit more creative in order to actually, like, you have to give a crap about them, you know, and give a crap about the characters. So maybe that's a better thing. Like, Cassian Andor emerged as a character that some people were like, you know, Cassian Andor, like, I don't know how I feel about him, or like whatever, or like he wasn't that interesting in Rogue One. I thought he was interesting in Rogue One, but like now the idea of like, he said that he had done a lot of things that he regretted, right, and he wanted to make good for that. We get to see that now. And so what is this Cassian Andor show going to be? Is it going to be kind of like a spy thriller where like there's a lot of like morally questionable shit being done by the rebels? Because that's interesting.
Almost certainly, you know? Because we've already seen that from him.
Yeah. And I think that's actually like a really interesting place to take Star Wars, right? I agree. Because then you are doing something different. You're taking the rebels who were like seen as just like, oh, the good guys, and you are questioning how much of that is in a more extensive way than Rogue One did, and right? The Last Jedi. The Obi-Wan series, it's like, where is that going to go? What are they doing there? Because I would say like the Obi-Wan series could be like a story about questioning fate. You know, Obi-Wan is alone on this planet for a really long time. Like, wouldn't it be awesome to have like this old knight story about like him like having like a breakdown on this planet of just like questioning his path as a Jedi, and like even his commitment to staying there with Luke, and like his commitment to the Jedi religion and you know, like their philosophies and stuff like that. It actually seems really interesting.
I hope it's 10 episodes of him, like, and the whole arc is him just trying to develop the scream to scare the sand people away.
Well, yeah, how does he know so much about sand people?
Yeah. Because there's fuck all else to do on Tatooine except observe the fact that they travel in single file to hide their numbers.
Yeah.
But yeah, because like Mos Eisley is one of the most interesting things in the whole of Star Wars. Like literally, like that is that is so true. And it would be super cool to see him dealing with all of the different types of scum and villainy that like roam through the... Like it's cool that that's a little hub, because it takes, you know, like it paints Tatooine as a place that is a magnet for all types of people and things. And
well, that's why though that statement that you just made, that Tatooine is the not Tatooine but Mos Eisley is one of the most interesting things in all of Star Wars, is probably the best indication that the original trilogy should have been the only Star Wars movies ever made. Because once you start explaining things and exploring, like, why is Mos Eisley interesting? Because all we know about it is that it is a wretched hive of scum and villainy. That's it. That's all we know about it. We know that there's a spaceport there, that it's probably the biggest spaceport on Tatooine, maybe. We know that there's a bar that doesn't let droids in, even though they have a droid that serves the alcohol. And we know that, Obi-Wan cut off a dude's arm there. We know it's under Imperial control. But, like, really when it comes down to it, we don't know a lot about it. And that's why it's interesting, right? That's why Boba Fett was interesting, because we didn't know a lot about him, right?
But I think if you explore stuff in a meaningful way, you do end up... Like, I mean, the Marvel movies are so good. Like, I didn't give a fuck about Ant-Man, right?
Yeah.
But when... That scene in Ant-Man when he returns and he sees his daughter for the first time and she's 17 or what, she's gone from like 10 to 15 or 12 to 17 or whatever the age difference would be in that 5 years. Like,
in Endgame,
in Endgame. Like, I cried at that. Like, that's like he see, like, in his emotion in that scene to see his daughter because he thinks she's dead. Like, and like, that's like, I only get that because you give a fuck about that character that you didn't previously give a fuck about, because they've explored that character in such a way that makes you care.
Dude.
Like, Star Wars can be given. You can do that for Star Wars, and they are doing it with, now Mandalorian and other stuff, like Rogue One.
On film, they had 7 attempts
to
do that, and they only nailed one of them.
Yeah.
My only ever interaction with the character of Wonder Woman was when they took the piss out of her in Family Guy, and then I watched the movie in the cinema, and I cried at that scene where she walks through No Man's Land in.
Yeah. Oh, that scene's beautiful.
Oh my god, it's fucking amazing. It's like one of the scenes of the.
And the new trailer's awesome too.
Yeah, I'm super hyped for that movie.
But, like, I don't know. Again, the Marvel movies and even Ant-Man had excellent stories written about him in comics. Like, now that moment from Endgame that you're talking about, that wasn't there, but that's because they, like, built that universe up, and it's like he is a comic support character who is, his movies are funny, they're comedy movies with a bit of action, whatever, and suddenly he's given this moment of weight and gravity to deal with, and it's you feel for it, but it's been constructed that way, right? Like, and I just don't feel like that's been successfully done in Star Wars yet. Will it? Hopefully. Are we going to get more Star Wars movies regardless? Yeah, we are. Like that. And that's the reality of it, is we are going to get more Star Wars. Will it be good? Will Disney learn from, mistakes that they made with the entire, post original trilogy? Like, what are we calling this now? We have the prequels, we have the originals, and what are these?
The sequels.
The Disneyfication of Star
Wars. Disneyfication?
Yeah.
The trequels? I
like the name trequels.
I'm okay with the trequels. Yeah. I don't know. The Rey trilogy, like, is it really Rey's trilogy? She didn't really get confirmed as the main character until the third movie.
The Kylology.
The Kylology?
Wow. Yeah. I think phenology works better, but he's definitely not the reason why anyone watches these movies.
It would make it even funnier to call it that.
The snowcology.
Jesus, when you see him in that vat, like, that's one of the, like, it made, like, I think at that point I was just like, this is gonna be dumb. I don't
yeah, I know. No, I knew it was gonna be dumb when it said "the dead speak!" !
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know. If you go back and read the title crawls for any of the movies, they're all pretty bad.
Yeah, I remember the Last Jedi one. You could take it out and put it over The Empire Strikes Back, and it's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The title crawls are kind of dumb, and I'm wondering if new Star Wars movies that aren't connected to the Skywalker saga are even going to happen.
No, they'll do away with them. Like, and I bet you they are a pain in the bollocks to write as well.
Yeah.
Like, I bet nobody enjoys them.
There is, like, an extra kind of, like, sort of vibe to all
there
of them.
is, yeah.
They're like newspaper heading. It's like, it just seems like I don't know.
Yeah, last time on Star Wars, this happened. You've missed this. Yeah.
But,
Younglings slaughtered by Jedi Master.
Yeah.
It works in A New Hope, because it gives context to a new thing that nobody had ever seen before. And it works in Last Jedi because not in Last Jedi, in Empire Strikes Back, because they are there are so many years
explain
in
the
between
passage of
both
time,
of them,
yeah.
right? And then kind of the same thing between that and Return of the Jedi, and like what's happening with I don't even know. I think Return of the Jedi's title crawl is more of a last time on Star Wars, whereas the one between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back is like, look, some shit has happened. Here's where we're at, right? And I think that's the more appropriate use of it, but it never got used like that ever again.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know.
Well, I think we should call it a show, fellas.
We should.
It was a show.
We
Did it have a plot though? So I mean, you know.
No, I think it was a mess of randomly collected ideas and tangential statements that didn't really produce it, but it was fun.
There is
Yeah.
one thing I would like to say, and that is when other people talk shit about J.J. Abrams, I always defend him, and I generally like his movies. And if he has a movie that's out, like I'll generally go see it. So all of my frustrations with this movie are just as a result of his greatest flaws all being exposed in the greatest possible way in this movie, and that's just what happened. So
I have a feeling with the way that Disney was handling the property that would have happened regardless of which director took the reins, and that's why so many big name directors didn't want to touch Star Wars.
probably, yeah.
Because they knew that was going to happen, and that's fair, you know. But we'll see what happens. At the end of the day, the three of us are massive Star Wars fans. We're nerds about this stuff, and we care. And I think, like, regardless of which movies individually we like or dislike, or which trilogies we're fans of or not fans of, you know, we can all agree that, like, Star Wars is supposed to be about hope. It's supposed to, you know, like, bring kind of like groups of the idea of like bringing groups of people together.
I thought you were going to say balance.
for like a cause, right? And like it doesn't even have to be about the Force, I don't think, right? But like I think there is still hope for Star Wars, and like we're seeing that in bits and pieces. But like things like Mandalorian and Rogue One are the rebellion now, you know, and Disney is the empire.
Wow.
That's actually you do such good meta analysis of like it's that's very good. Also, I would have loved it if you just kept berating us when you were like, we're all Star Wars fans, we're all nerds, the three of us, we are all virgins, we all live in our mother's basements. we I don't know.
We're gonna end this podcast now, not to go to sleep, but to play a D&D campaign that I wrote.
Yeah. You joke, but I have literally nearly 2,000 hours on Age of Empires 2, so I don't know if I'm any better.
I'm going to play D&D next week.
Oh, okay, cool. So we are all actually virgins, which is super interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, I don't know. Thanks for being here, and thanks to the listeners for doing all of the listening, and we will see you a long time from now in a galaxy very, very close. Because it will be this one. Because space travel has not been invented. Well, no, never mind. Alright, it's over. Fuck off. We're done.
Wow. You nailed the outro.
Thank you. I was practicing very hard. Yeah.
Space travel hasn't been... Fuck it.
Man, it's so hard. Like I've been ill for like 2 weeks basically, and it won't go away. And it's like I can like feel myself searching for words that I know, but I'm just so fucking tired and worn down that I can't pull them towards me. And it's like, oh, it's so annoying. It's so frustrating being run down. Like you can never, I don't know. You appreciate being well so much more. And that's my story.